Oh, let's mute that.
Hey, Fred, can you say something so we know if your microphone's working when you unmute?
Yes, I
Excellent.
I checked this out a little while ago.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Marshall. It is 6:33. You do have a quorum. The attendees are joining us. I see Amherst Media is in the house. I am about to make you yourself the co-host. I think we are good to go.
All right. Thanks, Pam.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the Amherst Planning Board meeting of December 20th, 2023. My name is Doug Marshall, and as the chair of the Amherst Planning Board, I am calling this meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and is available live stream via Amherst Media. Minutes are being taken. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this planning board meeting, including public hearings, will be conducted via remote means using the Zoom platform. The Zoom meeting link is accessible on the meeting agenda, posted on the town website's calendar listing for this meeting. Or go to the planning board webpage and click on the most recent agenda, where the Zoom link is listed at the top of the page. No in-person attendance of the public is permitted. However, every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the meeting in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship or despite best efforts, we will post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the Town of Amherst website. Board members, I will take a roll call. When I call your name, unmute yourself, answer affirmatively, and return to mute. Bruce Colham.
I'm here.
Fred Hartwell.
I am here.
Jesse Major.
Present.
I, Doug Marshall, am present. Janet McGowan.
Here.
Johanna Newman.
Present.
And looks like Karen Winter has joined us.
Present.
Thank you all. Board members, if technical issues arise, we may need to pause to fix the problem and then continue the meeting. If the discussion needs to pause, it will be noted in the minutes. Please use the raise hand function to ask a question or make a comment. I will see your request and call on you to speak. After speaking, remember to remute yourself. To the general public comment item is reserved for public comment regarding items not on tonight's agenda. Please be aware the board will not respond to comments during general public comment period. Public comment may also be heard at other times during the meeting when deemed appropriate by the planning board chair. Please indicate you wish to make a comment by clicking the raise hand button when public comment is solicited. If you have joined the Zoom meeting using a telephone, please indicate you wish to make a comment by pressing *9 on your phone. When called on, please identify yourself by stating your full name and address, and put yourself back into mute when finished speaking. Residents can express their views for up to 3 minutes or at the discretion of the planning board chair. If a speaker does not comply with these guidelines or exceeds their allotted time, their participation may be disconnected from the meeting. All right, so the time now is 6:36, and our first item on our agenda is minutes. And Pam or Chris, I didn't see any minutes in the packet that I was mailed. Am I correct? There are none tonight?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, Pam. All right, moving on to general public comment period. Let's see how many attendees we have and who are they? Okay. I see 10 attendees, and I will read the names. We have our liaison from council, Pam Rooney. Someone just designated as Andrew, Claire Bertrand, David Zomek, first name Grace, Jack J, Jennifer Mullins, Karen Sanchez Epler, Marilyn Billings, and Maura Keene. So at this time, I'd like to ask the public if you want to make a comment for during this public comment period. Reminder, it's for things not on tonight's agenda, so it should not be about the Hickory Ridge project. And I see one hand from Pam Rooney. Pam, let's bring Pam in. And Pam, I guess I need you to give us your name and your address, even though many of us already know you.
Thank you. Pam Rooney, 42 Cottage Street. I'm just speaking as a person living on Cottage Street. I was thinking about the University Drive project. I know that it's on your agenda tonight, but I may not be able to stay on the meeting that long to get to it. And it occurred to me that there was some really good discussion about if there was an overlay district of any sort, that the idea was floated of 5-story buildings. Currently, there are 3 stories allowed in much of that area. And it occurred to me that it would be a really wonderful opportunity to utilize the gift of an additional 2 floors or 2 stories to these buildings if there were some conditions that were imposed to obtain something for the town, and the conditions that might be imposed in order to gain a couple more floors of height and income would be that there might be the opportunity for some mid-level, mid-income housing and family housing that's incorporated into the design of the facilities. So it's just something to think about rather than giving away the store with the first pass, having some condition for allotting or adding 2 floors to the project might be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. I don't see any other hands from any of the public. So I'll wait just a few more seconds if anybody wants to raise their hand. Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. All right, so the next item, starting now at 6:40, is a public hearing on a site plan review. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, these public hearings have been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purposes of providing the opportunity for interested citizens to be heard. These public hearings are continued from November 15th and are 2023 and are opened simultaneously for the purpose of discussion. So Pam, that text was incorrect, was it not?
Sure was. So sorry about that.
Yeah, that's not correct. This is a single public hearing. It is not continued from a previous date.
Nope, sorry about that.
I should have read this earlier to see if I had any mistakes or questions.
I should have
Okay.
done a better job. I'm so sorry. So it is a single site plan review public hearing. It has been duly advertised, and you are right. We are opening it tonight for the very first time.
Right.
My
Okay,
apologies.
so I'm not losing my memory. Okay, so this is SPR 2024-03, Town of Amherst, 191 West Pomeroy Lane. Request site plan review approval to install 2 ADA universally accessible 6-foot wide crushed stone paths, accessible footbridges, and other site improvements, including boardwalks, benches, signage, kiosks, bike racks, shade structures, upgrades to existing parking area, and a connector path, under Article 3, Section 3.335 and Article 8 of the zoning bylaw. In the RO and RN zoning districts, in the flood-prone conservancy district, and the FEMA floodplain overlay district, map 19D and parcel 10. So do we have any board member disclosures of this project? Don't see any hands related to that. So with that, we can go on to our applicant presentation. And I guess I'll suspect that it's Dave here to introduce the topic. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you very much, Doug. Happy to be here tonight. I'm also joined by Jennifer Mullins, our permit administrator, and Jennifer was instrumental in pulling this application together. And I or other staff members may refer to Jennifer this evening, but we're happy to be here. I think I just wanted to remind Nate, I think when we turn to some of the diagrams for the presentation, I think, Nate, are you prepared to kind of run that show a little bit while I speak? Yes, great. Well, thank you very much for having us tonight. We're excited to be here and really this kind of kicks off, the beginning phases of the planning process for the former Hickory Ridge Golf Course. I just wanted to give a little quick background and then get into the project that we're here to talk with you about tonight. But just for the public listening and for the board members, very quickly, the town a few years ago did move forward and purchase the 150-acre Hickory Ridge Golf Course, a very exciting and probably once in a lifetime opportunity for the town to acquire this incredible property with over a mile of frontage along the Fort River. And we did so with a number of goals in mind. I won't go into great detail on all of those. The project I should state right out of the gate that the project did come with solar already assumed on the property. So the former owners had already really struck a deal that there would be 26 acres of solar on the property. And as you know, that property has already gone through many boards and committees in town and is under construction right now. So there will be 26 acres of solar. We have two pads, if you will, a central and a western pad of solar. And that project will be moving forward in earnest in 24. So the town acquired the property with multiple purposes. A large part of our interest in the property was connectivity, to try to help those residents living to the north of the property and to the south of the property in a number of apartment complexes, Mill Valley, the Renew, the Boulders, as well as Orchard Valley to the south, to really reconnect with this incredible piece of property. So at the current time, my staff and I are developing a comprehensive plan, which will include a number of different elements of the development of this property. But we had a couple of opportunities early on to get funding to implement one phase of that plan, and that is to get going on the connectivity piece. And so we were fortunate to apply for and receive a park grant to design and construct an ADA accessible loop trail, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And then we were also fortunate enough to get CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funding through the town for what we're calling a north-south connector, or a core trail that will connect those residents living to the north, in the neighborhoods to the north, with the budding village center down at Pomeroy Village Center. So with that, Nate, maybe I could ask you to put up the trail map, and Nate will, as I speak, I think he'll kind of take us around the property.
Or Pam, do you have that ready? I was downloading all the documents, but I realized there's quite a few of them.
You might just have to remind me, like, which document is which.
This is,
Yes.
Okay. So Is
I'm
it,
supposed to figure out the trail map would be,
the trail furnishings? Um,
probably the site map is what I'm guessing as the,
do you see it, this right down here?
yeah,
Is this the one?
right, Dave, that's what you're considering, the trail map?
That is not the annotated one, Nate, that you developed. You notice there are no numbers on it.
Whoops.
Uh,
We'll wait just a moment here to see if we can. There we go.
Yeah, bridge target, okay. that's what
And
that's
if you could
Okay.
just bring that up a little, Pam, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nate, are you able to control the cursor?
Can you get it, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm not, I guess we'll have to see Dave, when you're talking, I can, annotate or do things as
Yeah.
you're speaking, yeah.
Well, why don't we just start with a brief orientation to the property? And so I think the proposal before you orients from the parking lot off of West Pomeroy Lane, which is in the lower center portion of your screen and this image. And it has Hickory Ridge has a very large existing parking lot. And so our plan is to develop at least part of the trail system around that existing parking. The former clubhouse just to the west of that will eventually be demolished, but in the meantime, it will remain on the site until we're able to get funding to remove that structure. So our goal here is twofold. One is to create a trail system from that parking lot. And we're calling that the loop trail, and that begins at the parking lot. It's a 6-foot wide crushed stone, stone dust trail. It meets or exceeds all ADA requirements for slope, and it will basically take visitors on this loop that Nate is now following. And if any of you, just to give you a sense, if any of you have been to the Conti Refuge in Hadley on Moody Bridge Road, to their trail system, part of that trail system is a crushed stone path. The remainder of that trail system is actually an elevated boardwalk with pressure treated lumber. Most of this trail will actually be a 6-foot wide crushed stone trail. We don't have a lot of elevated sections. So the loop trail includes 3 small bridges, or 2 bridges and 1 boardwalk. Number 1 is an area of wetland and a stream crossing. We're proposing to install a bridge there that will double as both a pedestrian bridge, but also a bridge that will hold small vehicles like conservation trucks and mowers. And then as you loop around toward the Fort River, toward number 2, we need to span a short wetland there. And so there will be a slightly elevated boardwalk there to safely traverse over the wetland, but also to protect the wetland from impacts of human traffic, if you will. And then number 3 is a very small bridge that will be installed after we remove a culvert. And that bridge will just be a pedestrian, a simple bridge. And I believe in your packet are the plans for those 3 structures. I want to point out that a fundamental element of all of this work is ecological restoration. So we are removing a number of culverts in all of these areas. Our goal would be to remove culverts that have impacted the natural flow of streams and wetlands that are trying to move water toward the Fort River. So as we go, we'll remove the culverts and replace them with bridges that give wildlife a chance to move more freely, but also water and reptiles and amphibians that depend on that water as well. So that is the loop trail. I want to call attention before we go to the north-south trail I want to call attention, we do have a schematic in your packet. We will be improving the parking area that Nate could outline. And I believe that schematic was in, that plan is in your packet. It will include crack sealing the parking lot, and defining the parking lot, relining, repainting the various parking areas, parking spaces, as well as, yes, this is a good place to start. So what we're doing here is, Nate, perhaps you could show us the current main entrance to the former clubhouse is in purple. And our goal here is to move, from a safety standpoint and an aesthetic standpoint, our goal here is to move visitors away from the clubhouse, if you will. So we're going to redefine the parking. The entrance will now be in brown where Nate's cursor is. We will have visitors enter, come down the hill there, park. There will be ADA parking spaces clearly designated. We're going to be crack sealing the parking area. And then we're going to be creating a walkway on the northern end of the parking lot to get people to the main entrance to the trail. There's the layout. There we go. And so we'll create this space between parking and pedestrians away from the building with Jersey barriers for the time being. And that way we can create some safe distance away from the building for those folks coming to visit the area. So that's the loop trail. Along the way, we'll have benches, we'll have signage, there'll be an entrance kiosk that will welcome people to the conservation recreation area. There'll be information about the trails, contact information, rules and regulations, etc. And then along the way will be ADA benches. We are also proposing on the property 2 areas where in the future there will be shade structures or gathering structures. Perhaps, Nate, you could show where those are on the loop trail, the lower left. Right there. And then the star indicates where the entry kiosk will be near the parking lot. And along the way, and I think they're blue, they're a little small on my screen, are bench locations. So there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5 benches on that loop. And then we're proposing additional benches throughout the rest of the trail system. So perhaps I should stop here, if that's okay with you, Doug, before I talk about the north-south trail.
Okay.
I'm happy to keep going, and
Yeah,
then
I think you should go ahead and do the whole thing, and then we can
Okay.
have the site visit report and,
Okay.
you know,
So the second part of this first phase is trail connectivity for those folks coming from the north. And so what we are proposing using CDBG funds is a trail that comes from the northern edge of the property all the way down right through the core of the property, if you will. It hugs the side of the solar array. It then, so in red, and then Nate, if you could back up, you're going a little too fast for me there. It then jumps onto an existing road, crushed stone, crushed gravel road at number 5, crosses the Fort River, and then picks up the remainder of the trail headed over to the east, does another stream crossing over the Plum Brook, and then we're going to utilize, up near number 7, we're going to utilize an existing road that is an access road that our DPW owns, the town owns, to service a sewer pumping station at about number 7. And that road will take people out to a brand new 6 or 8 foot wide sidewalk on West Street. So that is the proposed route to get people to the village center, which is just slightly down the street from Nate's cursor.
All right.
I want to call out, eventually in a second phase, we will connect these two trails, and Nate can take and show you. So eventually we would like to connect the loop trail with the north-south trail. We don't have the funding for that right now, but that would be a phase 2 in this process. Again, these are 6-foot wide trails, crushed stone or bituminous pavement. All would be at 5% grade or less. We would have benches along the way, informational kiosks, etc. So why don't I stop there and open it up for questions?
All right. Chris, I see your hand. You want to?
Yeah, I
Alright.
just wanted to ask Dave to show where the other shade structure might be located in the future.
Nate's cursor is on it, I believe, right now, right there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, before we open it up, Doug, I wanted to say that citing these trails has been honestly one of the most complex, certainly the most complex trail project that I've ever been involved with in my career. Aaron Jock from our conservation department, Nate Malloy, former planner Ben Brager, a number of staff members have been involved in this project, but given the ecological sensitivity of the property, wetlands, vernal pools, floodplain, rare species habitat, we have worked extensively with the Conservation Commission as well as the Natural Heritage Program to find pathways, and we are threading the needle, I would say, in trying to figure out how to bring these 6-foot wide crushed stone paths through this property and still protect rare mussels, rare turtles, vernal pools, etc. So I think Aaron and Nate and many others deserve a lot of credit. We're also working very closely with Pure Sky, the solar developer, and they have been very accommodating and to our requests of them as we share the site with their solar project. So I'm happy to stop there and take questions.
All right. Well, then why don't we go to the site visit by board members today? I know at least a couple of people showed up. Chris, or which board members were with you this afternoon? Or Bruce, your hand is
Bruce
up.
and Janet were there. Yeah.
Okay, Bruce, your hand is up. Maybe you want to give the overview.
Well, I'll give it briefly. It was much more pleasant than Monday. I actually showed up on Monday, and that was a howling blizzard. And Joanna has the frosted version, so between us there's quite a coverage. But today it was more benign, and we walked about the first quarter or 20% perhaps of the loop trail down to where that bridge that David mentioned was being. He explained in detail how that was part of the restoration project. We saw the culvert was there, and you can certainly imagine a considerable difference and a more graceful connecting that will happen with this project so far as that watercourse, the former watercourse from half a century ago, will benefit and so forth. We saw the existing building. David explained some of the concepts or notions for the whole site. He noted that this trail project is fitting in with a number of other projects for the site. The solar project has been mentioned. What wasn't is that there is the Hickory Ridge Clubhouse that's there. This project is steering clear of that in a way that will allow that project to be a future development. It'll be a different type of development because it's on developable land, and as he said, there was about 5 acres, I think, of maybe I've got that wrong. Anyway, a certain small fraction of the site is developable, and there will be plans for that. And we saw where this project kind of interfaced or side by sided with that. There, we could see as we were there were 2 or 3 people were bringing their themselves and their animals. So it was even in this flooded state, there were people who were coming down. One imagines that this will be a highly valued and highly used, based on that, a highly valued and highly used project. He mentioned the value that this will bring to the neighborhoods on either side, and there was some discussion about how in future that those neighborhoods hopefully could be incentivized to contribute to the maintenance and so forth of the whole enterprise, which would be, from the town staffing point of view, a really good thing if it could be reliably made to happen. That's it from me. It was cold. Janet was there too.
Okay, Janet, you want to add anything?
Sure, those are great summaries. There was questions about whether there'll be garbage at the parking lot for dog waste or human waste, and the preference was that there be, carry in, carry out. Clearly people with dogs are going to use a site, so that's one thing. There are questions about maintenance of it because, when I had walked a different part of the site before the meeting, and, clearly there've been flooding and on some of the other, like unofficial paths, and there were lots of leaves. And I was just thinking, I know the town is really stretched on maintenance. So there was a discussion about that. There were, we saw the culverts that were going to be moved, and it looked like that would be a lot of restoration of natural streams that were sort of thwarted. Questions about, protecting turtles and things like that. And that's all being covered by the Natural Heritage Program to make sure that during construction, turtles are kept out of the construction area and, checked to make sure that they are. So that was a concern. And, it's a big site. Like, from where we were, we could see the fencing to the solar array, but it was off in the distance. It just, and then 2 people came up to walk their dogs, and there were questions like, oh, are there going to be benches? And, we're like, yeah, there's benches, because these people wanted places to sit and places to be out of the sun. So it looks like this project has really thought about a lot of these different issues.
All right, thank you, Bruce and Janet. So, board members, questions for Dave and team? I guess I don't see any hands yet, so I'll jump in with a couple. I guess the first one is, Dave, you talked about the sort of, not the loop trail, but it's called the North Trail or whatever, as a sort of path to the town center. Is that really a shorter way to the town center than any other way that they might have? Because it doesn't look like it's very direct. And then the second question I had right off the bat was, what are the plans for the clubhouse, and how would the parking area that's reserved for town use be used?
Sure, let me address your first question, Doug. So as far as I know, without this trail, the shortest way to get to the village center would actually be to go on East Hadley Road up to West Street and then come all the way down West Street over a very up and down sidewalk that is in so-so condition, et cetera, et cetera. So by connecting to, and we've had conversations with Mill Valley and the Brook, and they're very interested in this trail for their residents, for outdoor recreation and enjoyment, exercise, et cetera. In fact, many of those residents are already using the property. This was the most direct route we could make for those residents living to the north, given the, as I said, kind of threading the needle between and among all the resource areas. We did honestly hear, and I think Chris or Jennifer may want to comment, we did go to the DAAC and also the DRB, and we got some very instructive feedback from both those groups. There was a lot of discussion at the DAAC meeting about would there be any possibility in the future of putting in a sidewalk on West Pomeroy Lane to connect folks more directly that way, east-west, to the property. And I, of course, said, the town would be very interested in that in the future, but it's not part of this grant cycle. And we've done some quick cost estimates, and given all the stream crossings and wetland crossings there, and just the distance, we're probably looking at $750,000 to $1 million to put a sidewalk down to the village center to the new roundabout. So this was our way, using existing pathways, using the property itself in the most cost-effective way to try to get people north-south to the village center. It's not, I mean, this is a good bit of exercise to get down to Mission Cantina or El Comalito or the convenience store. But it is a way, and it will be, at 5% grade or less. It will be bikeable. It will be, if you have a young child who needs a stroller or something like that, you will be able to take them over the bridges and over the entire trail. So that was our initial goal. Your second question, Doug, was about the clubhouse, and I think Bruce shared a little bit more of the detail that I shared with the group that made it out there today at 3. Again, we're developing a comprehensive plan for the entire property that we will present to the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and eventually the Town Council. But clearly, the clubhouse needs to come down. It was in poor shape when we bought the property. The previous owners put very little money into it, and it needs to come down. We are trying to pull together a funding plan for that. We estimate the demo cost and removal somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. So it's not an easy lift for us right now. But that area of the parking lot and the clubhouse, as I shared with Bruce and Janet and others, is really the only and most developable piece of the property, given the frontage, given the upland, given the floodplain, rare species habitat that is remaining on the property. The other developable parcel, part of the property, was developed for solar, and it's across the brook. So we do need to look creatively at the parking lot and the former clubhouse. In recent months, the staff and some boards and committees have been talking about this as a potential site for a South Amherst fire station. It clearly has enough acreage to do that, and the topography would work. Other features, it's on water and sewer. It could also be looked at, and we are looking at it, perhaps for, say, senior affordable housing. It could also be a site for a future senior center or community center. There are a number of different uses. And I think by designing the pathways the way we are, we don't preclude any of those things from happening.
Okay. On that path and the connection to the town center, have you talked with PVTA about perhaps having a bus stop at the West Street terminus of that path?
There is a bus stop in the village center right near, right across from the Moan and Dove. So that is a very short walk north to the sewer right-of-way access that we own, and the road that part of that road will be made into the connecting trail to Hickory Ridge. So that is the proposed way that we believe people will get there. They'll either come from the village center, around the Pomeroy Village Center, walk on the brand new sidewalk up a short walk to the north, or they will take the bus down to the village center and again walk up north, or ride their bike, or with a family with a stroller, and then jump on the trails. And within minutes, you're out in this remarkable property, and you're surrounded by all the natural beauty of the former golf course.
Okay. I guess I was just thinking that if I'm living in Mill Valley and I don't have a car, I may want to shorten my commute as much as I can so that I can get to the bus right as I come out, rather than having to go down to the town center. But that can be worked out later if it needs to change. Bruce, I see your hand.
Yes, I didn't have any questions per se about the project as presented. What we didn't go through, but I think probably we have privately, is a extremely comprehensive documentation by Dodson and Flinker, which indicates a thoroughly thought out project. And I must admit, I looked at it for half an hour or so, and I didn't begin to get to the bottom of what was there. So I really think that I personally have no particular concerns about the engineering, the design, the concept of the trails, where they're going, how they're routed, how they relate to wetlands. David explained the extraordinary concern and consideration for protection of wood turtles, which involves enclosing the site, going through with some kind of magic device, which may be just a pair of eyes and a lot of experience, and getting every bloody wood turtle out of the site, and then having a gate that people who are building this project have to close after they go through it, so the wood turtles don't inadvertently creep in and find themselves being squished. I mean, it just seemed to me that this project is covered every conceivable base. So but there are two things I'd like to explore that really cropped up in the site meeting, the site visit, and Janet's mentioned one of them. But I think because I thought that they might be, we might choose to make them subject of conditions. The first one is we noticed a little green baggie of dog poop there that had been almost strategically placed right at the entrance to the path, as though someone was trying to send a message. Well, the message that this project and the town apparently wants to send is carry in, carry out, and David has said that the town is reluctant to install trash cans, and specifically dog trash waste cans, because they are just so disagreeable to have to deal with. That they would really like to avoid that, and to encourage people to behave properly and bring out what they take in. And so therefore it occurred to us that we could assist that if we decided to apply a condition that basically said that that the board's review condition that this project be managed, or that the management plan include the stressing of the carry in, carry out policy. And if we were to do that, we would probably help give authority to the town's attempts to do that. But I wanted to ask, first of all, to ask David to comment on that, and such that we could consider whether or not some condition of that sort might be appropriate.
Dave?
As I stated to Bruce and Janet and others on the site visit, I'm certainly supportive of that. We do struggle, both the Department of Public Works and the Conservation Department and the Recreation Department. All three departments struggle with the dual use of our recreation lands, our parks, our commons, and our conservation lands, dual use by dog walkers. And again, it's a very common use. It may be one of the highest uses of our lands, but the dog waste issue is very real. One part of that is that many people do not pick it up, and two, those folks who do pick it up sometimes often leave it along the trail. They hang them from trees. And when we do have receptacles, I believe we have 5 to 7 receptacles around town. It is a very large burden for staff to have to pick up, usually weekly, do that run and dispose of that waste. And those waste receptacles are at places like Mill River Park, Puffer's Pond, Amethyst Brook. I know we have some at the dog park, but that's a little bit different facility, but these are at trailheads. So I would very much like this to mimic Conti. Conti, as far as I know, the trail in Hadley does not have any dog waste receptacles. It's carry in, carry out. Dogs must be on a leash at Conti, and I have never seen a dog off leash at the Conti Refuge Trail. I think that would be wonderful. I do think we're going to have to be a little flexible if we find that dog waste becomes a real problem at Hickory as these trails come into operation. We may at some point have to do the receptacles. It's just a reality, but I would very much not like to do it. And the same holds true of trash receptacles. If we put out trash waste cans, people will fill them up. They will come at night and fill them up with household waste. So I favor carry in, carry out, and people taking personal responsibility for themselves and their dogs.
Are there any such places in Amherst where dogs are just not allowed? Is that a precedent?
All 80 miles of our trails, conservation trails in Amherst, are open to dog walking. Our policy is the Conservation Commission's policy currently is dogs must be on leash at all times on conservation land, except they can be off leash at Amethyst Brook and the Lower Mill River area during certain times of the early morning. That's the policy. It's hard to enforce.
And there is, I believe, some evidence that dog waste left in the landscape contributes to pollution in the waterways. Have we got any sort of public information boards that remind people of that?
We do. We have
Okay.
signs all over town. The
Two.
data is very clear on that. I wish we were more successful. We might need to do more of a public campaign on that, but
Okay.
we are having water quality issues in the Fort River, in the Mill River, and Buffers Pond, and some of that may be some dog waste may contribute to that. But I don't
Okay.
want to get too far into the weeds on this unless you all do.
Okay. Janet?
So this issue is in my wheelhouse, since I have a dog and, I walk them on trails in the street, and there's definitely a problem with people, like this issue. I wonder though, if we put it in the permit and say, carry in, carry out, if that's just going to tie your hands, because I would rather have the conservation department and just decide a policy and put it on a sign and enforce that. As one thing, because you might want the flexibility of changing later and you don't want to come back and change the condition with us. That seems kind of a time waste. I also wonder if you might, and this is not to be put in a permit, but just have, bags, dog bags there. So, and, signage saying carry it out, but, like giving, providing those. I don't know if you do that at other parks, but I have when I first moved to Amherst, Amethyst Brook was just horrendous. And I have a dog and I started avoiding it because it was so unclean. And we definitely want to keep that out of the Fort River, I think. So I think that it might be best to leave it to you, but if it helps you, we could put it as a condition.
Dave?
I tend to agree with Janet. I think it might tie our hands a little too tightly, and I just don't want to have to come back if it's changed. I hear you on the dog waste bag. The feedback we've gotten on that, Janet, is if you put up the bags, then you need to put up the receptacle for the bags once they've been used. So believe me, I would love to just put out the bags and have people take it in their car. Practically speaking, what people do is they leave it for us on the ground, and we'd rather have it in a container than on the ground or tied to trees or thrown into the bushes, which happens too. So anyway, I do agree with you. I think a condition might be a little too restrictive.
Okay. Johanna?
Thank you. My question has to do with flooding and the river jumping its banks, which, happens and is going to happen more frequently. And I'm just, how are you thinking about this new infrastructure and preparing it for more frequent and more severe flooding events?
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it came up on the site visit, Johanna. And so, first of all, we are we're really trying to be minimalists out there in terms of what we put up. I am super conscious of sign pollution. I think I might go a little overboard sometimes. I think we actually need clearer signs. Case in point is a certain parking lot near Stanley Street where we need better signage. But anyway, we're taking this approach, which is kind of a minimalist approach. We're not trying to add too much infrastructure in the floodplain. We realize that some of these trails will overtop, particularly the loop trail will be overtopped by floodwaters. We're taking a little bit of a cue from Hickory Ridge, which is many of the crushed stone trails for the cart path for the golf carts that Hickory Ridge put in 65 years ago have been flooded over many, many times, and they're still there. So these will be at grade. They will be constructed, per the Dodson design in a really solid way. There will be very, very little, relief for anything to catch on. I think to Janet's point earlier, the key will be removing material that ends up on them. But the Conservation Department just recently acquired a skid steer with a front end loader, if you will, or a bucket, I should say, that is 6 feet wide and can maintain these trails and many other ADA trails in Amherst. So we're trying to do it in a minimalist way. We're not trying to add too much infrastructure. We believe the bridges will be fine, even if they're overtopped by floodwaters. And that's why we didn't go with the Conti Refuge model, which was doing pressure treated lumber raised up. This area floods more than the Conti Refuge area, so we just wanted to avoid that because of the damage and the cost of rebuilding. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you.
Dave, since you mentioned existing trails that were for the golf carts, are you eradicating all the other trails on the property, or, what's the vision for how really natural this will ever look?
That's a really great question, Doug. So part of what I've said twice, I think, is threading the needle here. In order to get these trails, the Loop Trail and the North-South Trail, to be approved by the Natural Heritage Program at the state level, Aaron Jock did a masterful job of mitigating and compensating. So we are retiring a number of the old cart paths that Hickory Ridge Golf Course maintained for 65 years. And we are basically letting nature take its course and rewilding those trails that we don't think are either needed anymore or perhaps go in areas that are too sensitive. We've had feedback from, for instance, the turtle biologists, and they've said, hey, some of those cart paths that were part of the golf operation take people into areas where the turtles really like to do their thing. And so we've eliminated those, and that has allowed us to make it through the permitting process with the Natural Heritage Program. Having said that, what you see on the in your packet for the North-South Trail and the Loop Trail and the connection between them, those are the core trails that we're proposing. And those are the improved trails. We didn't overlay that with what we're calling the single track trails. In other words, there will be other trails on the property. For instance, we heard loud and clear when we acquired the property, please make some really long, straight, nice, aesthetically pleasing cross-country ski trails. So we heard that. And the westernmost part of the property is very conducive to that. So we have what we call a single track, and this is nothing more than a mowed path. There's no infrastructure, there's no crushed stone, there'll likely be no benches. So there are going to be other trails, not a lot of them, but for instance, one will go all the way around the western array and give you views of the Mount Holyoke Range and the farmland to the west in Hadley. So yes, there will be other trails. but these will be the only ones that will be improved. And we are actually retiring many linear feet, hundreds of linear feet of the old cart paths. We're even going to retire one of the bridges over the Fort River, which we really don't need 5 bridges over the Fort River. And that's a very high cost of maintenance long-term for the taxpayers of Amherst. So we may even retire a second bridge over the Fort River. So we may have gained some trails, but we're eliminating many linear feet of other trails.
Okay. Board members, other questions? All right.
Doug, could I just share one other thing in terms
Sure,
of
Dave.
timeline, just to give the board a sense of timeline. These 2 grants are really knocking on our door here. We are hoping to bid this project out in January, both these trail systems, and have this work completed by the end of June 24. Not to say the trails would all open by then in their finished form, but at least to meet the grant deadlines. If we have other major components, obviously we would need to come back to the planning board and other boards and committees. For instance, lots of other ideas have been talked about at Hickory Ridge, an amphitheater, anything to do with the clubhouse and the parking, any reuse of that area would obviously come back through the planning board. And as I said, we will be presenting a comprehensive plan which outlines some of the options for the frontage. And then, yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. So these elements we think are reasonable and achievable, but there's many, I think a couple of years of other projects that we will propose for Hickory Ridge.
Okay.
Thank you.
Janet?
So this issue was raised in the development application report and in my mind in this today, which is about maintenance. And so, you know, we have a huge trail system in Amherst, which I love, and I know that there's not enough staff to keep trails open and cut during the growing season or maintaining, you know, wood bridges. I mean, even just planks. And I can point to many examples where I live. And my concern was, you know, we're building this beautiful trail system. Can we maintain it? Do we have the staffing to do it when we're not maintaining our current trails? And it's not a criticism of anybody. It's just that we don't have enough staff. And so Dave did bring up the idea of having a volunteer corps in the neighborhood. And I think you could get people from different parts of Amherst to join that. And I like that idea, but I do think that's a really serious issue. Is like, we might build this beautiful path, but will they be maintained and cleared? And if they are maintained and cleared, is that at the expense of other trails? So I don't know how to fix that. We could say maintain your trails in a good condition in our permit, but I think that's a big issue. And I don't think you can solve it without some more hiring.
Yeah, I had kind of the same thing going through my head because of my involvement in this cycle for CPAC. You know, Dave, you guys put in a request for significant money for trail maintenance. Not at this location as far as I know, but you know, I mean, how long are we going to keep building things and some other things fall apart? So what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, we really aren't, with the exception of Hickory Ridge, we're really not expanding our trail system much at all. So I do acknowledge Janet's concerns, and they're my concerns, the town's concerns about how do we maintain what we have. But a couple of things. So I think, first of all, the trend in the last 7 to 10 years has been, we've really been trending toward not acquiring more land. Hickory Ridge is certainly a signature project, a very special piece of property, but I have not proposed a new acquisition other than Hickory Ridge, I think in the last 4 years, maybe 5 years. So we're not expanding trail system except for Hickory Ridge. We're also trying to get more creative. I mentioned to Janet and Bruce and others out there in the field that we do have a very active group of abutters who live in Orchard Valley who are interested in volunteering to help maintain these trails. these trails are actually, in some regard, easier to maintain than a forested trail with root systems and complex wetlands crossings. I mean, these are fairly straightforward bridges that might be 10 feet long. So yes, they eventually will need to be replaced, but I presume these bridges will last between 10 and 20 years, and the decking is the only thing that needs to be replaced. As I said, I think a 6-foot wide crushed stone flat 5% or less trail is actually relatively easy to maintain versus, say, I don't know, the KC Trail that spans much of the length of Amherst, or the Robert Frost Trail that's, goes up on the Mount Holyoke Range and ends up all the way up in Wendell. So those are challenging, much more challenging trails to maintain. The other thing I wanted to say is that we are partnering much more these days with the Kestrel Trust, and the Kestrel Trust does have a very robust staffing plan and staffing, thanks in large part to Kristen DeBoer. So they are much more interested, willing, and able to help us, and they're helping us on the Robert Frost Trail, and they just helped us do a raised boardwalk at down off of Bay Road to thwart a beaver issue down there. So I think we're going to be turning to the Kestrel Trust more and more to help us. We do have 2 full-time staff, and I don't anticipate us getting any more staff in the field. But I think it'll be a real challenge. But I guess my point is we need to spend more money on maintenance and not acquire more acreage to maintain.
Okay. Janet, I see your hand. You can unmute.
So I didn't want to dissuade you from acquiring more trails or land. So, and I live near a part of the KC Trail, and have clipped my way down the trail, and my husband has lifted limbs. And one time he went down with his weed whacker because everything was getting really grassy near the wetland, and ran into a neighbor who was actually doing that. And then I know some other neighbors are also cutting things back. So I wonder, in a way, if maybe that's a solution to the problem where, if the conservation, if your guys are coming in to do my section of the trail, if you called me or my, interested neighbor, and they can say, hey, they're coming in, we could all work together or something like that. So, that would be more fun than feeling bitter, and like I'm the only person that's cutting when it's actually not true. So I wonder if that kind of could get kind of organically grow a little bit, because I've talked to other friends who live in different parts of Amherst, and like, yeah, I would do that. People have said I would do that if and I don't want to put another burden on staff, but there might be a way of having little precinct captains and stuff like that who call around.
No, absolutely. And we've been working on trying to get that structure in place a little bit. And there are some neighborhoods that actually already maintain their section of trail, working with Brad Borderweek or our assistant land manager. So absolutely, Janet, I think we're open to that, and we have to be more open to it in the future, because we're not going to get it. I don't think we're going to get any more personnel. We still will be going to CPAC and seeking grants to pay for the materials to build bridges, rebuild bridges, do ADA improvements, things like that. But we're not out there expanding the trail system. In fact, I'm scratching my head saying, what trail have we added in my time as director of conservation other than these? I've been really kind of bully on not doing any more trails. Pete Westover created 80 miles of trails, and I know how much maintenance they take, so I've not been anxious to add to the trail system myself.
Okay. Dave, just went through my head. Does the town have liability concerns if you have volunteers out there next to staff?
Yes, we do. We do ask volunteers to sign, of course, standard waivers and things of that sort. But as I said, there's a number of neighborhoods that we've organized volunteer efforts, and then we've also had many at places like Puffer's Pond, Mount Pollux, as well as Orchard Valley, taking care of the pond and conservation area off of Pond View.
Okay.
So,
All right. Let's see, not seeing any more hands from board members. I guess I will ask the public. This is the time if you would like to make some comments on these proposed trails at Hickory Ridge. So far, I see one hand from Claire Bertrand. Could we bring her over, Pam, and give her a timer to keep track of her comment period? Welcome, Claire.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for this presentation. I just have a couple of questions. I'm curious if you could speak more to what ecological restoration means. And mowing. So I think what I've heard, and I would like it clarified, is that these trails that we're discussing are 6 feet wide, fully accessible, but there may be other trails that will continue to be used, or so if you could talk more about other smaller walking trails. So those are my two questions. Thanks.
Okay, Dave, you are muted.
So let me see if I get those, Claire. So ecological restoration. Let me talk a bit about that. So when we first acquired the property, we knew and full well that we would need to do a comprehensive plan for the entire property, given all the competing interests and desires and all the excitement that the acquisition generated. So we set out to gather information. We had a number of meetings out there. We also had an engage page on the town website where we got hundreds and hundreds of different comments. That led us to begin to gather zoning data. We surveyed the entire property. We also mapped all of the wetlands, vernal pools, floodplain, estimated and priority habitat for rare species. We got in touch with the state and brought in their biologists. They have looked at mussels in the river. They've looked for rare plants, as we've talked about, turtles, et cetera, et cetera. So that has all been kind of fed into a plan. We hired a consulting company to come in and help us, and we worked alongside them to create, as I said, I shouldn't say comprehensive, an ecological restoration plan. And what that does is it basically says, it gives us ideas about how to manage the property in the future. What do we want to see in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years along the riparian corridor? What do we want to see the wetlands do? This was a manicured landscape for 65 years. That is not our intent moving forward. We want to do a couple of things. We want to control invasive species because multiflora rose and Japanese knotweed and many others will take over. We also want to encourage certain types of habitat to thrive on the property. So much of the stream bank, as an example, much of the stream bank was channelized and hardened. And think of riprap. You're all familiar with riprap, when we basically keep the river in its channel and we harden the banks of the river. So this ecological restoration plan looks at all of that and says, how can we, for instance, add woody material to the river to diversify the ecosystem in the river? Things like that, Claire. It also speaks to what parts of the property will be mown to keep it in early successional habitat, where we might encourage grassland birds and other pollinators to thrive. So certain parts of the property will be mowed. To your question about mowing, certain parts of the property in the future will be mowed periodically to keep it in early successional habitat. But along the river, we'll encourage a full canopy to shade the river, the Fort River and the Plum Brook. Smaller trails will be developed in the future, and those trails, as I said, will simply be a mowed path. If you think about the path up to the top of Mount Pollux, if you've been to Mount Pollux, it's simply, mowed 3 times a year, and there's no improvement, and it's grass. And we keep it mowed, so we keep down poison ivy and ticks. And so there will be trails around the edges of the property that are in that kind of trail. Low maintenance, cross-country skiing, running, hiking, but they won't be fully ADA. The only fully ADA trails will be the loop and the north-south trail you see on your maps. I hope that answers those questions.
Claire, are you all set?
Answers my questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next person that got their hand up was Pam Rooney.
Hi, Pam Rooney, 42 Cottage Street. Again, speaking as a resident of Cottage Street. Couple questions. I heard mention of the master plan and other elements such as amphitheater and the many requests that came in from Engage Amherst. Is there any opportunity to see these trails in particular as part of that master plan? No one has yet seen the master plan. Is it imminent, and is there an opportunity for the community to see what alternatives are being proposed as part of a master plan? Second item is access to East Hadley Road. It's the north-south trail. Looks like it comes far to the to the east of all of the apartment complexes that front East Hadley Road. Is there any opportunity to create a connection further to the south? I'll just say southwest of the trail that you're showing now. It seems like folks would really have to make an effort from the heart of that apartment complex to make their way out and around in order to get onto the trail. And that may be, some access may be precluded by the solar fields, but perhaps there are roads that could be fenced off and allow access through that area to a more direct connection. And then thirdly, as a former U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service employee and a landscape architect, I really appreciated the details that were provided to you all regarding construction of the bridges. And I noticed that the use of helical piles is proposed. I am a strong advocate of helical piles because it allows construction starting from one bank and essentially building the bridge as you go with the piles. So I was delighted to see that detail. I think it's a very strong approach to protecting the wetlands and minimizing impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Dave, you want to take those two questions?
Sure. Yeah, in reverse order, just acknowledging the helical piles. Yes, we're very proud of that element. It is a very small wetland, but we're trying to do the very best we can to protect that wetland on the western side. So in terms of the comprehensive plan, we are pulling together those elements of that plan. And yes, I would say it is, I'm not sure I'm going to use the word imminent, but certainly in the next few months, we will present that to the various town boards and committees. We had this opportunity to move forward with these core elements of the trail system before that plan was ready. We felt pretty confident that, one, we would not preclude future development ideas on the frontage by doing these trails, and that we would lose these grant opportunities if we didn't move forward. So absolutely, we are coming forward with what I call a comprehensive plan for the property. The north-south trail extension, if I understood the question correctly, is there a way to connect further to the west in the northwest? The short answer is yes. The more complete answer is we are having conversations with the owners of the apartment complexes and condos to the north. Those have been kind of ongoing off and on for the last year and a half. We certainly would love to make a connection more to the north west. I will say that those apartment complexes and owners, their biggest concern is liability. So if you build it, who will come, and is it just the residents of one apartment complex or the residents of many? And as you may know, if you're familiar with the GIS map of that part of town, it's Mill Valley Apartments that really has the bulk of our northern border of our property at Hickory Ridge. So the answer is yes, we are working on a trail connection to the northwest. We still believe where we currently have it is the fastest and easiest way to make a connection all the way out to East Hadley Road. And so that's kind of our first goal. So in theory, if you, just to play this out, if you live in Orchard Valley and you wanted to hop over West Pomeroy Lane with your family or friends or by yourself, jump on, one of these trails, you could walk safely all the way to up to East Hadley Road, jump on the new expanded sidewalk multipurpose trail, multi-purpose sidewalk there, and walk all the way over to Gulf Park and back on this trail, and vice versa. So that's our goal with that north-south trail. I do hear you, Pam. We would like to make a more direct connection to the west, northwest, and we're kind of working on that. It will not be fully accessible. There is no way for us to achieve an accessible trail because of the topography in that area.
All right. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, David. Next public comment from Karen Sanchez Epler. Welcome, Karen. If you could give us your name and your address. And
Karen
you should have
Sanchez.
3 minutes.
Yes, Karen Sanchez Epler. My husband Benigno Sanchez Epler is here too, 22 Cayman's Circle. So abutters and much people who have much loved walking in this rewilding landscape. Saw on the map how close the connector trail is to the solar farm, and just wondering how I guess how you're seeing the solar farm being incorporated into the conservation and recreational aspects of Hickory Ridge, and I guess too, who's responsible for that? How much the solar farm people are responsible for what that border looks like? How much the town is taking charge of that?
So that's one question. Who pays for the green barrier between the fence and the trail, if there's any? The other question that we have is, what is the town thinking about the relationship between the Garris Trail on the other side of the Ford River and the connector? These are companion trails. Garris Trail has a discontinuity problem over at when you get to the bridge. But it would be quite an amazing loop, Garris Trail and the connector, and that's I wonder whether there's any planning for that.
All right, thank you, Dave.
Yeah, let me come back to the Garris Trail. That's a really great question too. I'll try to address the first question. I may need a little redirect. Happy to take that if from the person who asked the question. The interface between the trail and the solar, this is quite a challenge, and we've given this quite a bit of thought. There's certainly those people who are challenged by the fact that there will be 26 acres of solar on this beautiful property. I will start by saying, as I did earlier in the meeting, we bought the property knowing full well that there would be 26 acres of solar. That changes the property, it changes the landscape. However, there are a number of positives that come from that. Number one, we signed a 20-year lease with Pure Sky for that 26 acres of solar. Springfield will be the off-taker of that green power, not the town of Amherst. We frankly did not, at the time we signed the deal, did not have the demand for that, and I don't think we still do. This would be, I think, about a 6.1 or 6.2 megawatt array. So in part of this project, we are helping Springfield to achieve their carbon goals. So I think it's a wonderful thing because Springfield did not have the opportunity at the time that this deal was struck. Number two, we will also get a pilot payment, a payment in lieu of taxes that will be about 3 times as much as Hickory Ridge was paying when it was a golf course. So it will be on the order of $85,000 in the first year. And that will help pay for other municipal expenses, firefighters, police officers, planners, and the list goes on. In terms of how the array will interface with the trail, I think it's a great opportunity for us through the interpretive sign system to really talk about what that array is doing. It really, if you've all been next to solar arrays, they're quite, in general, benign. They are there. They are relatively quiet. Yes, there will be some battery storage on this, but the battery storage will not be near that north-south trail for the most part. But it's an opportunity for us to interpret what that array is doing, the green power that it is generating 365 days a year. So we see that as a real plus. I will say, when you look at the map, we really had to put the trail as close to the array fencing as we could because the Natural Heritage Program wanted us to stay out of great turtle habitat and away from the Fort River. So that's what we did. You might say, well, why couldn't the trail be closer to the river? Well, with trails come impacts like people, dogs, children, cute turtles, believe it or not, they go missing from natural habitats quite a bit. So we don't want wood turtles and box turtles and snapping turtles and other turtles to be impacted in the least possible way. So that's why the trail is as close to the array in the central array as possible. But I think it's a great opportunity for people to learn about solar power. We all need power, and we're going to do some interpretive signage with Pure Sky to educate on that. I will say that once the arrays are built, there's very little maintenance to them. Pure Sky will be out there once a month with a pickup truck. There's really very little maintenance, so there won't be a lot of trucks or activity around the arrays. There'll be many more people walking the trails, I think. In terms of the Garrett Trail, I'm really glad you asked that. That's a wonderful question. It is part of our comprehensive plan for that area. The Garrett Trail is off of West Street, right across from Crocker Farm School. And it's a little bit of a trail to nowhere. It's wonderful. It's right along the Fort River on the east side, but it's a dead-end trail. And our hope is to one day, there are a couple of old bridge abutments along the Fort River, and our hope is to connect it via a bridge using one of those old bridge abutments to this new trail on the west side of the Fort River. But again, that's another day and another project, and we don't have the funding for it right now, but that would be the hope somewhere down the road.
Thank you.
Yes, and that wasn't an anti-solar power question from me. It was just seeing how very close it was and wondering what you were thinking about it. So thank you so much.
No, and by the way, I did not interpret it that way in any way, shape, or form, but we've thought about that a lot. You're going to be very close to about an 8-foot fence. And, people, it may not be the most aesthetically pleasing, but I think it's that appreciation for what those panels will be doing. And they'll be trackers as well. So they're going to be following the sun. So that'll be kind of cool to watch out there. when they're tracking the sun and generating power for all of us.
All right. Thank you to Karen and your husband. Thank you, David. The next, and I think the last public comment is coming from Marilyn Billings. If we could bring her over. Marilyn, please.
Where did she go?
Did we lose her? There she is.
Where? Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's bring over Marilyn. Please give us your name and your street address in Amherst.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Marilyn Billings from East Hadley Road in the Brook, actually. I live down in the, let's see, the closest probably to this project from the Brook, and I've been really interested in this project all along. So appreciate your comprehensive, really detailed assessment today, David. That was really wonderful. I'm interested in a couple of different things. One being from the Brook area, where more on the northeast part. And I'm thinking that the trail that you have coming from the north is probably coming down along that roadway that is already used by Public Works for the sewer system. Not sure, so I wanted to ask that question. And noticed that recently there was a cement barrier put up right almost outside my door. That may be part of this. I wasn't really sure. But just wanting to acknowledge that a lot of people come down that dirt road and come into the northeast part of the Hickory Ridge area and go out walking through there. And there's a path that's not mowed, that's not maintained at all, that I actually go out on a lot. And I picked up some gum wrappers today when I was out there, just to talk about the trash a bit. But I'm hoping that's one of the areas that does get at least mown 3 times a year, because it gets heavy use even from the people across the way and on Columbus Street. I think that's the name of it, Columbus. That come in there and walk their dogs and do all those kind of things. So I guess the question about what, where is that the place where you're looking for the northern piece to connect onto that connector trail is a good question to start with. And also just to say that being out there today, given, yes, there was a lot of rain that came down, but it's the most flooded I have ever seen that part of the northeastern part of the area. And I don't know if it's because of the fencing that the solar power has put up there or what the situation is, but it's unusual.
All right.
So
Dave?
thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn, for those comments and questions. I'll do the best I can to address them. One is just on the flooding. I don't think the solar fences have anything to do with the flooding. I think we are living in a time of...
In a different time, yeah.
Yeah, a different time of unpredictable weather, and the weather patterns are changing. And, we just, in the last week and a half, got probably 6+ inches of rain. So yes, we will see that. Great questions. I'm so glad you're on the call here and in the public hearing. We still have some work to do. I referenced working with Mill Valley and the property owners in the Brook. We had some very productive conversations in 21 and 22 with the association in the Brook. I think there is general support for the project. The town does have a sewer easement, a sewer maintenance easement over that property. And, we have worked with the leadership at the association in the Brook. And I believe there's general agreement there to grant another easement, an additional easement. So that's the direction we would take on the northeastern portion of the Brooks property, connecting us all to connecting the trail system to East Hadley Road. I don't know anything about the cement barrier. I will look into that. It has nothing to do with this project, but you got me curious, so I will take a look in there and see what that's all about. It might be something the DPW put in there. But anyway, so I appreciate all your comments. It is an existing trail already, but it is unimproved at this point. It's simply a path through the through the vegetation. So but
Mhm.
it would be 6 feet wide, 5% or less grade, and have benches along the way and interpretive signage in various locations. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marilyn. All right, so that was our last public comment hand. I see the time is 8:02. Janet, I see your hand up. Why don't you make your comment or ask your question, and then we'll go to a break.
Well, I have a question based on what Ms. Billing said. I've seen Hickory Ridge much, much more flooded than it was today, at least on the Pomeroy section. And I was wondering about the solar array. Has their stormwater system gone in? And I was wondering if the excess water was, if they haven't put that in yet, is that because they've cut the trees down and the land is not holding the water the way it normally did? So has that stormwater management been installed into that array? Because I think we shouldn't be seeing that flooding, or wondering why, if it's just.
So first of all, really virtually not, yes, some of the trees have been cut in the solar array locations. But I am completely confident that has nothing to do with the level of the Fort River in this current flood period we're in. Any number of things, the Connecticut River is at, record highs for this time of year. The Fort River actually surcharges. I don't know if you're familiar with surcharging, but essentially the Fort River is backed up all the way through Hadley into Amherst when the Connecticut River rises. So water can't get into the Connecticut River. It's like being in a traffic jam at a sporting event, or even a roundabout with lots of traffic. Think about the Connecticut River as the roundabout. Rivers coming into tributaries of the Connecticut can't get in. It slows all the water down and then it backs it up. So I'm quite confident that the Pure Skies project has nothing to do with the water levels in the fort at this point. The other thing is that we have a number of beaver dams in the Fort River, and those beaver dams just naturally are holding back a whole boatload of water. Now, when this was a golf course, I will say, often the Hickory Ridge folks would breach those dams and discourage, I would use in quotes, discourage beavers from spending a lot of time on the golf course. We have not done that much of that, so there may be beaver dams, there may be multiple beaver dams in this stretch that are holding back water. The other thing is that Maryland has a very unique perspective because she lives northeast of the property. We can't see that section from the road. The only section you can see from the road is really down near the loop or down near the clubhouse. So I think she has a very unique perspective on, seeing that flooding up there in the northeast corner. But it's simply, we got a ton of rain and the water can't move quickly into the Connecticut River. But I'm confident it has nothing to do with what Pure Sky has done very little work out there, frankly, because of delays in construction schedules.
So I'm sorry. So just to clarify, the stormwater management system is in there or not yet?
It is not, because
Okay.
yeah, it is not, because they haven't done any construction. The only work they've done is to come in and put crushed gravel on the road and cut down the trees that were allowed in the permit.
Okay.
And then they've done a little work on the bridges and a couple of stream crossings, but other than that, no.
Yeah.
And all the native vegetation, except for the trees, is all still there. Both array areas are completely vegetated. Other than the trees, all the other vegetation hasn't been touched.
All right. Dave, if I could ask you one quick question. How does Pure Sky access the solar array? Are they using the black existing shared access road in sort of the southeast corner?
Maybe if Nate or Pam could put that image back up, people would want to see this, because I think it is important. Let's see.
Yeah, I guess it's the route that has the number 5 on it is what I was wondering about.
Correct. So the only access and the central access for the construction of the arrays and the maintenance of the arrays will be, and I'm sure somebody's cursor is going to find West Pomeroy Lane there in the lower right. Yes.
Mm.
Lower right, keep right there, Pam. Oh, you went by it. All right, keep going. Right there.
Right
Thank you. Near
there.
that road. So Pure Sky has improved that road. They will improve that bridge number 5. With the number 5 will be improved for both the construction vehicles and maintenance vehicles. And then we will use that bridge as a pedestrian bridge for the trail. And that will be the access to the arrays.
Okay. Great, thank you. Nate, I see your hand.
Sure, thanks. I was just gonna say kudos to Pam. She was the one who was following Dave during the presentation. It wasn't me.
Thank
So
you.
if you saw funny smiles, it was because Pam was doing doing the
Thank you,
driving.
Pam. Thank you, Pam. I thought it was Nate, but thank you.
That's okay.
She beat me to it, and she was doing a good job. So
I will give Nate all the credit for my error.
That's all right. Thank you all. Okay, so the time now is 8:08, and I'm going to propose we take a 5-minute break and come back at 8:13. And we'll continue the conversation, hopefully go through findings and conditions and talk about how we want to proceed. So turn off your camera, mute yourself, and when you return, at least turn on your camera so we know you're back. Thank you.
Pam, I just wanted to let you know that I think I accidentally either left the meeting or got booted, but I am back now. It's Johanna.
Oh, do you know when you left?
It was during the break, and then I
Oh,
joined at 8:14.
oh, okay. So we haven't began again yet. So
I see.
you're perfect. But thank you for letting me know. I hope I didn't give you the boot. That was not my intention.
Pam, I'm also,
Hi,
can you,
Karen.
Yes, we
yeah,
can hear you, Karen.
my internet is pretty iffy here. I'm in Hawaii,
Okay.
but so I've been listening, but the picture was gone for a while.
Okay.
And all gone for a while, and now it's back,
But
hopefully.
now you're back. Okay. Sounds
I,
good.
we were admiring you because we thought you were in Europe. So I was like, wow, she's up really late.
No, it's actually, it's much earlier. I'm wide awake.
Good. Okay.
Better than the rest of us.
Yeah. So I have 8:16, and hopefully everybody's hiding behind their dark screen at the moment. There's Fred. Nope, that's
There's
Jesse.
Jesse.
I'm here, but I'm eating a cookie, and I don't think people want to watch me eat a cookie.
Okay. Fred, are you back? Seems like we lost most of our public attendees, although there's still 3 remaining.
Mhm.
Hello, Fred. Are we allowed to proceed without Fred having evidence that he's back, or should we, how long should we give him?
I think you can proceed without him and just catch him up when he arrives.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I guess I have 8:17. And do board members have additional questions for Dave and his team? Actually, it looks like Nate's still here, but we lost Jennifer. So I'm not seeing any hands. So at this point, Chris, would it make sense for us to go to your development application report or to the possible conditions and findings?
We can go to the development application report. I don't think there are many things that are left unresolved, but I will say that one of the things I didn't catch on my first go round was that that structures within the FPC need special permits from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that was something I caught today, spoke to Rob Mora about that, and sent you all an email about that and an additional revision to conditions.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
if you wanted to go through the development application report, we could start on page 2.
Okay, Pam,
And-
why don't you scroll up?
Note that I had only known about one shade structure, but there are actually two shade structures in phase 2, so in phase 1, so I wanted to mention that. And same is true in the general section down at the bottom of that page, that there are two shade structures. Other than that, I don't think I made any changes. Oh, except for the very last page. And also there's a reference to one shade structure, but I would suggest that should be changed to 2. But there, other than that, there weren't too many issues. On page 3, we talked about a landscape plan, and they really didn't submit a landscape plan. There will be new landscaping in the form of the plants needed to stabilize the slopes or restore wetland areas. And we asked a question about maintenance, and I think Janet already asked that question.
Yep.
And we received an answer about that. There's no lighting. They are proposing signs, 3 different types of signs: a typical signpost sign, a kiosk sign, and a proposed parking area sign. So, and we did have questions about that, which arose later. We realized that some of those signs were oversized and that they were taller than is allowed in the zoning district in which they're located. So when we get to the conditions, we can talk about, there were waivers and conditions listed on that sheet that I sent you, and we can talk about that.
Just as a note, Fred has arrived.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, keep going, Chris. Or maybe you were finished, I don't know.
Okay, parking and bicycle racks. There are bicycle racks proposed. The DRB suggested that you might want to consider a different type of bicycle rack, but I don't think the applicant has proposed anything different. So maybe you want to live with the bicycle racks that were proposed by the applicant.
Well, we could ask Dave, what did you guys think about using a different type of bicycle rack?
As opposed to the loops, Chris?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're very open to that. I think the planning staff had talked about that. I think the loops can be frankly kind of limiting, and the likelihood that, it's one thing to put in loops at a kind of distant parking lot on Bay Road for a conservation trail, but I think the likelihood that we're going to get lots of people interested in coming here, walking, biking, hiking, running, driving is greater. So I think more bike racks is better. So I think the loops, anything we can do that is better than the loops would be good, and we're open to that.
Yeah, I guess my recollection is that they were recommending a sort of larger consolidated structure that accommodated a whole bunch of bikes as one unit as opposed to multiple individual loops. I think they thought it might be aesthetically better. I think it's likely to be more compact also.
So you could make a condition about asking asking the applicant to come back with a different bike loop arrangement.
Yeah.
Could we ask him to come back with a different sign later so we can move this along?
A different sign?
You said the signs were non-conform, like there was some problem with the signs. They
Yeah,
said,
I think we should talk about that when we get to the waivers, and then we can be more definitive about what's
Okay.
going on with the signs.
All right.
Let's see, the number of parking spaces, I think 27 is shown on the plan. 20 was listed in the management plan, so I think that the planning board should consider that 27 is the actual number. And I don't think you have to have a condition about that unless you want to. That was just a question that I had.
And that was about 27 what?
Parking
Oh,
spaces.
Parking spaces, yeah.
Yep. And the number of parking spaces is based on this rather vague requirement. You know, for all other permitted uses, and they list a bunch of different uses, that the applicant should provide adequate parking spaces to accommodate occupants, employees, members, customers, clients. So we have to just kind of take a best guess at how many people would be here at any particular time. And the estimate is, you know, that there are going to be 27 people coming here. And then I think there are an additional three ADA spaces. So it's all really 30 spaces altogether.
Mhm. Well, isn't that a sort of function of the fact that the existing parking lot has, you know, more spaces than that, and that we're really just leaving an existing, you know, those existing spaces, so that, and the rest of the lot is being taken offline.
Yep.
Okay, I see Bruce and Johanna. Bruce?
I've been to the Conti Trail in Hadley a few times, and my recollection is that there are actually fewer, and possibly far fewer than 27 parking spaces down there. And I typically haven't been there when it's been full, but maybe I just haven't gone at the right time. So I suppose we could be guided by that, and so insofar as we are, 27 would seem to be a good number. If Conti's not a good guide, well, then someone will say so. And secondly, as you say, they're proposing a certain section of an existing parking area will be upgraded, patched, and so forth. I mean, minimally upgraded, as I understood it from the conversation today. And my guess is, or my figuring is that if this turns out to be significantly insufficient, we will find out, and we would have the opportunity to redress that in considering the development of the developable part, the fully developable part of the parcel.
Yeah. Well, we also, I guess, have the option of simply saying that a smaller number of spaces are required. And, you know, if it turns out there's really not enough demand for 27 spaces, and if at some point the town decides to, you know, repave the lot and take out half of the spaces, then they'd have that flexibility. So I guess we could go that way too. Johanna?
I think there are only 2 ADA spaces, but
Now,
maybe I'm remembering wrong. Yeah, but I think there are only 2 now.
Dave is nodding his head yes, I guess, in agreement.
And then, yeah, I'd be curious to hear Dave's thoughts on reducing the kind of required number of parking spaces. 27 does seem generous. I mean, I feel like I often go to Amethyst Brook at peak times, and there might, you know, there's parking there for maybe 15 cars. So this would almost be double that. My math might be wrong. Maybe Dave knows some of the numbers for what is the parking capacity at other conservation areas, and are they anticipating more traffic here? And, you know.
Dave?
These are all great questions. So I think, I mean, when the trails are built out, I do anticipate these being very popular. So kind of taking in, my similar recollection to Conti and also Johanna's reference to Sweet Alice parking off of Bay Road. I believe that is 15 plus 1 or 2 ADA designated spaces at the Sweet Alice. So I think 25 to 27 is a good place to start. To Doug's comment, I mean, we're really controlling the size of this parking, at least for the short term, with Jersey barriers. So, I would not want to move those willy-nilly, and I presume if we increase the parking there, we would have to come back to the planning board. So I think 27, is a good number to start with. I think it's going to be a very popular place. And also, West Pomeroy Lane is not a place to park by the side of the road. So, we don't want to have overflow parking up on West Pomeroy Lane. It is just really a dangerous, narrow, high-speed connector. So I
Okay.
guess
All right.
I'm fine with that number.
All right. Let's see, Nate, I'm gonna call on you.
Sure, yeah, while the conversation was happening, I looked at some aerial photographs of Conti. And so, originally it was about 15 spaces there. And then in recent years, they added, I think there's about 35 now. They have a pavilion overlook near the parking, but they extended the parking. It was grass. And so I think that they responded to the popularity by, increasing the gravel parking. And so, I think the number of spaces here, Dave's right, that this will be popular. So I think this is a good number to start with, and we can see how it's used, and then see what other future uses are proposed for the site. But I think it would be, I mean, the parking lot's already in existence, so it seems strange to recommend fewer or to condition it with fewer. I mean, what we're doing is, trying to take the existing parking lot, and Dave said to get some separation from the clubhouse, but then, have enough parking spaces to accommodate the use. And so I wouldn't recommend trying to condition it with a lower number.
Yeah, I guess all I was doing was trying to say a lower minimum and giving you guys flexibility where you can have, use more spaces or create more spaces without having to come back and tell us,
Right.
we need 5 more spaces. That just seems ridiculous.
Okay, yeah, I understood. I misunderstood that, Doug. I see. I understand that now, right? If you said a minimum, you can always do
Yeah,
more.
yeah. I mean, we don't seem to have any penalty for having more spaces in this town. But, do we have to have a specific number now, or could we just say, you need to have at least 15 and whatever, if the demand warrants, you should add more.
I like that flexibility, and we certainly don't want to clog up the planning board's agenda with future agendas with coming back to ask for 7, 8 more spaces. So
that was my thought, but I guess we'll see if anybody wants to go that direction. Janet, I do see your hand, but I'm going to call on Chris first. I see hers too.
Yeah, I just note that I'm looking at the plan that was prepared as part of this application for the parking lot, and it does show accessible parking spaces 3. So I think there was a question about whether there are 2 or 3. Nate might be able to bring up that plan. It was the proposed parking layout plan.
Or Pam.
Or Pam.
I
I think
think it was
there's,
the existing that we were talking about.
yeah, there's existing 2, and I think we proposed 3.
Proposed 3. Okay.
Yes, but existing currently right now 2.
Okay. All right, Janet.
So I was sort of thinking about Groff Park, which gets a lot of heavy use, and it seems to me kind of roughly the same size. And so I thought this was 30 was a good number, but I don't see any reason to make it smaller, because if it has a lot of use, then it's there. And I think we don't really know what the other side's being used for. And so it might be a situation where the parking lots between the two, the recreational area and whatever that building turns into might be shared parking. So I think we're in a great situation where you can just move the Jersey barriers and, whatever, but what that other use is going to come back to us and we can relook at it. But it seems to me like, Grove Park is very heavily used at certain times. It seems to be roughly the same amount of space. And, I think Dave's right that people are going to come to this park. It's very close to a lot of population areas. People will drive there because they don't really want to, there's no real sidewalky way to get to it from the village center or other parts of town. So I think, let's just see how this sits. And, we're going to come back, they're going to come back with the covered seating areas. And, I think let's just not make it super complicated and just go with this number.
All right, Janet. Fred.
Yeah, I do both. I would say no fewer than 27.
All right. Karen.
No fewer than 20, that's saying you have to have 27. Let's just leave it flexible. Everybody is guessing what's happening, and you don't want a lot of access parking if you don't have to, and you don't want to give them requirements that we know nothing about. So it gives them the leeway to do whatever they want if we say no fewer than whatever, 15 or whatever.
All right, thanks, Karen. All right. Let's see.
You want me to keep talking about the development application report?
Yeah, I think we ought to finish that and go on. Keep going. Yeah.
So the erosion control seems adequate because the Conservation Commission approved it. The management plan talks about the management and it hits all the usual things. We did have the issue about maintenance and we've already talked about that. Traffic impact statement wasn't really needed because there's not going to be that much traffic added to West Pomeroy Lane as a result of this project here. Drainage was reviewed by the Conservation Commission and they agreed with what was being proposed. We haven't heard from the fire department or the town engineer, but I'm not sure that that's very important at this time. The fire department probably wouldn't have a lot to say about this project. And the town engineer has looked at it as part of the Conservation Commission review. So I think it's fine if you choose to approve this without hearing from either of them. We already talked about some of the design review board's comments. One of their comments actually had to do with extending the side. There are side kind of, I don't even know how to describe them.
They're curbs on the bridge.
Yeah, they're like fence. They're sort of like fences along the bridge, and the design review board thought it would be nice if those didn't just end at a 90-degree angle, but if somehow they ended at a 45-degree angle. So that was something that they talked about, but then they really didn't actually make that statement in their recommendations. They just said that they wanted those bridges to be and the trails to be ADA accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Disability Access Advisory Committee was mostly concerned about how do you get here from elsewhere, rather than, they didn't really have too many comments, if any, about the project itself. They were more concerned with the fact that there really wasn't public transportation to get here. And that's not something that the planning board can do anything about. But Dave did suggest that at some point in the future, it could be possible that perhaps the senior center van or something like that could be able to bring people here, or one of the PVTA vehicles. And then site furnishings, we were suggesting that when a shade structure is decided upon, that it be brought back for your review and approval if you so choose. And you could say the same thing for the bench style. It depends on how much you want to be involved with that.
And is that comment superseded at all by the need for the special permit now from the ZBA?
Well, the special permit it depends. I mean, if the planning board wanted to see the structure. I don't know if the ZBA is really that concerned about what the design of the structure is as they are about the placement of the structure in the FPC. So I suppose you could allow the ZBA to choose the structure style, or you could make that your in your bailiwick, and then the ZBA would just be talking about the fact that there is a structure there. So it's really up to you how you want to handle that.
Okay. So I guess when we get to the conditions, we can talk about that some more.
Yep. Do you want to go to the conditions?
I think so, yeah. Does anybody object to moving on to the conditions and findings? Don't see any objections. Pam, do you think you could bring up the draft that Chris sent out this afternoon, the revised conditions? And there we go. Yep.
That's it. Yep. So it turned out that there were more waivers than we actually highlighted in the beginning. But we did know about some of these. There was a waiver that they asked for from the lighting plan because they're not providing any lighting. A waiver from the traffic impact statement. And then a sign waiver for signs that are over 12 feet in area. Now, some of these signs are 3 by 4, and there are more than one of them. 3 by 4 is obviously 12 feet, but in some places there are, multiple of these signs that are over 12 feet. So that's why we suggest that you could grant this waiver. And then signs in the RO zoning district are limited to 4 feet high, and some of these signs are indeed higher than 4 feet high. If you wanted to, you could look at the detail sheet. I don't have those exact images in my head, but anyway, those are two waivers of sign requirements. And then there's also a requirement that there be not more than 1 or 2 signs exceeding 12 square feet in the FPC zoning district. I don't really know what the point of that was, but that's another waiver that you could choose to grant. So I do want to talk about sign waivers now and then go on to parking waivers.
Yep. Bruce.
It seems to me that the size of these signs generated by the specific function here, which is perhaps a non-normal thing for an RO district. I can see from having been to many of these places with 3 by 4 signs that give context maps and things like that. Clearly, that seems to be a reasonable or certainly not excessive area. So I certainly advocate for that waiver. And then as you go down to the next one, if you have a sign that's 12 feet, we don't really have to look at the drawings, I don't think, because you can say even if that 12 square foot sign was sideways with a 3 foot vertical and 4 foot horizontal, if we had 4 feet limit, then the bottom of the sign would be a foot above ground, which would be good for dogs but hopeless for humans. So clearly we need to endorse that waiver as well. So I would argue that it's reasonable for granting the first sign waiver, and it's a no-brainer, I suppose you could say, therefore to grant the second. I'm not sure about third, but it seems again that this is probably a function of the information, wayfinding, interpretations, and aspirations for information exchange and education. And so I would feel thoroughly comfortable in granting that waiver as well for that reason.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. I can say that I share Bruce's sentiments about these 3. Anybody else on the board want to weigh in? Okay.
Okay, then we go to the parking waivers.
Sure.
There's a request for a waiver from section 7.105, which is lighting of parking lots, and then a waiver from section 7.112 for screening of parking lots. And in this case, it seems like the parking lot is kind of screened already there's a big kind of a berm along the road that screens the parking lot, and there's also a lot of trees. So even though it's not immediately screened right around where the parking lot is, it is in fact screened because of that mound and trees along the road.
Well,
And then
Chris, does the bylaw require an actual screen that is a manufactured device, or
no,
could we simply say in the findings that we think 7.112 is met because of the configuration of the topography and the vegetation?
I suppose you could say that. That's fine with me.
That seems more defensible than just creating a
Yeah.
waiver.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I like Doug's idea of advocating why it's
Mhm.
okay rather than basically taking a pass.
Okay, so no waiver, but there is a reason why it is actually screened.
Sure.
And then a waiver from section 7.106, which has to do with the width of a two-way driveway. It's supposed to be 18 feet wide. When I measured it on the GIS plan, the driveway that comes into the parking lot, it appeared to be more like 12 or 13 feet wide. But you can imagine that even though it is both an entrance and an exit, there probably aren't going to be lots and lots of cars coming out in and out, at the same time. So a car could wait for another car to pass. So
Well, this is a particular requirement that I suspect the fire department is always interested in, because there are certain fire code requirements for I think it's as much as 20 feet of access for fire trucks to at least respond to, events at buildings. And now maybe that doesn't apply in this situation because there's no building to be protected or, responded to.
it does have to do with the protection of buildings, and the driveway that is close to the clubhouse is much wider. It's like, probably 30 feet wide. So you
Okay.
could say that the driveway that's associated with the clubhouse is adequate, and the driveway that is associated with this parking lot for the trails doesn't really need to be 20 feet wide to accommodate fire trucks, in
All
my
right,
opinion.
Chris, I see Dave's hand. Dave, you have a thought about this?
Yes, I was just going to kind of emphasize what Chris was saying, which is we're going to provide fire access.
David froze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's give him a couple seconds. Gotta love Zoom. All right, well, why don't I go ahead and call on Janet? She's the other hand at the moment.
I'm starting to feel uncomfortable with this kind of deliberation or conversation. It seems to me, I'm looking through these sections. It's like, it's possible that we could waive the screening requirement because of this kind of, if it's 3 feet of a berm that meets our zoning requirement, it might be nice to have some hedges put there so to screen the parking lot. I don't know we don't have a landscape plan, but we're waiving that. Now we're waiving, like if there's a car in the parking lot and the fire truck would want to come in and be able to get out or whatever. So I'm not comfortable waiving requirements just because I don't know why these are requirements I've just seen and we haven't heard from the fire department. This might be a big problem with them. We don't know. In fact, they are burning the building next door. They practice on it, and the Jersey barriers would, so I just don't know what we're just sort of, it looks like we're just hustling through the requirements of the bylaw to get to waive it for any reason. I just feel like I'm not quite sure how we got here.
Okay. All right, thank you, Janet. Dave, I see you're back. You're still muted at the moment.
It looks like Dave's on his phone and not.
Yeah, does
on his-
anybody know how to tell what Dave should do to unmute on his phone?
Push *9.
*9?
I think so.
Well, it's not doing it. Oh, well,
Nate, do
One thing-
you?
One thing I was going to mention is that the access, there's two entryways, and the other drive that goes directly to the clubhouse will still be there. So, if there is emergency access needed to get to the structure or into the site, there is another way.
mhm.
So there is, what will be the parking lot access, and then the, what is going to be town of Amherst kind of restricted access.
Okay. Janet, is your hand still a legacy? Okay, Bruce?
I don't share Janet's concern that we are rushing through this. I think this is what we do. And I don't think that we should be too concerned about adding cost to the project, because I think that we've got it. Do I understand correctly that the 13-foot wide trajectory is already there?
Yes.
And that we're considering saying that that is acceptable. So I don't think it's entirely arbitrary. I think it's a question of whether we want to ask the applicant to indulge in further work that would be basically mean that we'd have to build an 18-foot driveway when we've already got a 13-foot driveway there. So I don't think that's a good way to spend money, just to get an extra 18 feet because we might need it. I think under the circumstances, we should accept that 13 feet is reasonable, and if it takes a waiver to do that, I would argue that we should do so.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Karen?
I totally agree with Bruce. I don't think we're rushing through it. I think we know this area, and it just makes sense to not spend a lot of time changing this. I think it's totally adequate.
All right, thanks, Karen. Janet?
So, I could see not hearing from the town engineer because basically this place is covered with pathways. They're being removed. We're putting in pretty much pathways on pathways. I don't think it's going to affect the stormwater or the movement of water across the site. I think actually will improve it. I have no idea what this fire department wants. And this is like the second thing we're saying, oh, we don't, it's like, so we don't know if this is adequate for a fire truck, but we feel like maybe it's okay because it's there. I just don't get it. I've been
Okay, we hear you.
I've been on this board for 5 years, and we hear reports and we make adjustments.
Yeah.
And we don't hear reports and we just accept whatever's being put to us. I just don't get it. And I want to vote for this project. I think it's an excellent project, but I'd like to have our ducks in order.
Okay. Chris?
I just wanted to say that we're very diligent about sending our transmittals to the town engineer and the fire department. And it's just a happenstance that they seem to be so busy recently that they have trouble responding. And so we have to make a judgment call about whether it's necessary to hear from them for a particular project or not. And in this case, I think the town engineer's work was involved with the Conservation Commission. So I believe that, that is adequate. And then I really felt that the fire department's work would be more concerned with whether the building had a problem or not. I didn't imagine that there would be a problem in the driveway. So, I don't know what to say about this, but my recommendation would be to go along with it and say it's, the 13-foot driveway is okay for this particular situation.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Bruce?
I was going to say something more or less along the lines of Chris, but I'll phrase it differently. Do I correctly understand that these matters are forwarded to the fire brigade for their comment? And I think Chris said yes, that they are. And then I guess I could say, do I correctly understand that the fire department would choose to respond to something that was important and might put a lower priority on something that was less important? And I'm Do I therefore correctly understand that this means that this is not so important to the fire brigade? And what Nate said would make me understand that why should it be? Because the only possible problem that they might have there is a car on fire. And as Nate said, you can get to the parking lot much faster and much better by coming in the other side of the Jersey barrier. And I don't think the Jersey barrier is going to be a problem for a fire truck.
Okay. All right, thanks, Bruce. Janet, do you have anything new to say?
I do. I mean, we have the assistant town manager here, and I think, this is super frustrating to me. We did this on a Jones Library building with the fire department and the engineer and the Strong House. And so it's like, we need to get response from the town departments. I totally respect the work. I understand they're busy. I also understand Chris can't make them respond, but, we need to hear this. We need this information regularly and not, guessing that they didn't respond because it wasn't important or because they're busy. We need something here that's not happening.
All right.
So I was going to jump in. Dave texted and said he is having issues connecting. I don't know if it'd be worth just having Dave, if you can hear us, just if you leave the meeting and try to come back. I don't know if that would help, but we can come back to this point if we'd want, just to see. I don't know if.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Janet's, based on the comments we've gotten, Janet's view is in the minority at the moment. Unless, we haven't heard from everybody, but Chris, I will say that you skipped over waiver number 7. We went right to number 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. So waiver number 7 is
talk about that for a minute and see if Dave can fix this problem.
That's an existing condition. The first 50 feet of the driveway, I think, or first 30 feet is supposed to be less than 5%. In this case, we think it might be over 5%. We're not sure. We didn't do a calculation on that. But if in the case that it is over 5%, you could grant a waiver for that.
So this is a conditional waiver since we don't have a survey of the property and know what's really the case.
Right. That's right. Nate might be able to figure it out on the fly. This just came to my attention this afternoon when I was talking to the building commissioner.
Uh-huh. All right, Janet, is your hand up to talk about number 7? Okay, no? All right, well, number 9, Chris, was about landscaped islands?
Yes, if you have a parking lot that's over 25 spots, then you're supposed to have landscaped islands that are 4 feet wide and with raised curves throughout the parking area. And we usually say that they should be every 10 spaces, but in this case, it didn't really seem to be necessary. Those are usually in places where you want a fairly manicured look to the situation. And in this case, it's not really a manicured look. And it's kind of I might even call it a temporary situation. I don't think, projecting into the future is hard to do, but I think, when this site gets developed as a whole, the parking lot is not going to look the way it does right now. So it'll probably be improved. So putting landscape islands in with curbs that are, who's going to maintain the landscape for one thing, but putting those in at this time, I don't feel is really necessary.
So in cumulative, are we being asked to hold the town to a lower standard than any private applicant would be held to here? Chris?
Well, that's a good question. I think we're mindful of how much money the town has available to do this project. They have money from grant sources, and when we start adding, making the parking lot look like a manicured parking lot and making the driveway 18 feet wide and redoing the slope of the entry drive to be less than 5%, you know, you're starting to add a lot of money to this project, and I don't think this project has that kind of money. Nate is more familiar with the budget than I am, but that would be my
Mhm.
my comment.
Well, I mean, you know, I mean, I think outside parties could view us as sort of being asked to, you know, waive a whole bunch of things that, you know, a private applicant would read the regs and show up. Hey, you know, I'm here to show you that I've met the regulations. So maybe that's not a reasonable view, but I think it could be. Bruce and then Fred.
It's a good question that you asked, Doug. And common sense suggests to me that that as this has been explained, that this is part of the 5-acre developable portion of the land, and that therefore has a different value. My understanding is that this new development, they're putting their money where it makes sense, which is in the trails, and they're upgrading or utilizing the existing parking area at a reasonable level. And I agree with Chris that spending too much on this when it may be reconfigured when the subsequent phase of what actually happens, you know, a really thoughtful use about how this this developable portion of the site is used. I think this makes absolute sense. So yes, it may be that we are holding somebody to a lower standard than normal. I'm not sure that that's true or not. I don't know, but it may be that it is true. But I think there's a very powerful logic for doing so, and I definitely think in the public interest, welfare, safety, and those three things that we are all about here. But putting the resources into the trail system and the conservation and restoration of the land is where we, in good conscience, should be putting. And I think it would be, I would feel much more vulnerable to accusations that we are diverting town public funds to do minimal and pecuniary augmentation of driveways and parking with landscape islands. I think I would feel very vulnerable to public vitriol for making that kind of a decision than creating a kind of precedent about slightly diminishing the standards under these particular circumstances. So I'm comfortable with this set of waivers based on what I just said.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. So I see several hands from board members, but Dave, you are back, and I presume you know how to unmute now. Do you want to make any sort of comment about where we're at?
Sure, Doug. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Apologies. Yeah, my laptop, something happened there, so I'm on my phone. Yeah, I'll be brief. I guess I've missed some of this conversation trying to reconnect, but I guess what the point I wanted to make was I think following up on something Bruce said is that if you look at this, we're looking at this project as a multi-phase, multi-year effort to develop the Hickory Ridge property to meet some of the goals of the town. Short term, the low-hanging fruit really are the trails. So we've proposed the improvements that we feel are safe, provide accessibility, and put money into resources, you know, within the property that gets people out in this naturally beautiful place. When the town decides to redevelop or develop the available 5.5 acres into what it wants the highest and best use, I think obviously we would come back to the planning board and various other boards and committees to have that be reviewed, and we would expect a much higher standard I think Janet referred to shared parking. I fully anticipate that, say, for instance, if it's decided to put a South Amherst fire station on the site where the clubhouse is now, or approximately there, that why would we repave, 2.5 acres of land when we could share parking with, the open space parking, the trail parking, and overflow parking, say, for staff of the new fire station. So we fully expect to come back to you and meet those higher standards. But right now, we feel as though we presented a project that and we had to consider asking for the waivers that Chris has outlined. So that's, I think, where we are.
Okay, thank you, David. Let's see, so in order, I see Bruce and then Fred and then Jesse, and I suspect Bruce is a legacy. Is that true? Yeah. Okay, so Fred, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, first of all, I think I'm 100% in favor of the 7.111 waiver from the landscaped islands and all of that. I don't have a problem with that. I think I may have a bit of a problem with 7.102 and 7.106 because the way I see it, to some extent, there's a public safety issue in terms of being able to navigate the end of a driveway and the width of a driveway that may accumulate some two-way traffic. So I guess my attitude is a little more nuanced. I'm totally in favor of the waiver on the interior islands and so on, but and I'm not sure that the drive the slope of the entry drive. I don't think it's much different than 5%. I would think with heavy equipment, that should be a comparatively inexpensive fix if it's even off at all. And I think it could be widened a little bit again in not much time with some heavy equipment that the town owns. So I think we ought to look at the 7 and 8 maybe differently than the way we look at number 9.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Jesse?
Yeah, basically, I was going to agree with what Fred just said. Now that David's back, did you hear our questions about the width from a safety standpoint? Do you have any contact with engineers or fire about that yet?
We have not heard back from the fire department or the town engineer on that. No, we have not. I will, yeah.
Then I'll just echo, I feel like those are important ones before we waive it, to just feel confident that there's not a safety issue.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. Janet? And
So
then Chris.
I think I am going to repeat myself because I think Dave missed it. I feel like this is our second application where we haven't heard back. The planning board hasn't heard back from departments. And I'm thinking, oh, Dave's like the assistant town manager. And so, it's like, I don't want to waive something because it might need waiving, but no one's measured something, or we haven't heard back from the fire department. I have lots of firemen in my family. And I think, if we're not hearing back from the departments, we can't make decisions. And if the town wants us to make a decision quickly, which I completely support, we need to hear back. And so, I'm making a plea, I don't know if on behalf of the board, that we need to hear from town staff. We can't just waive the bylaw because we haven't heard anything, or assume that there's no problem because we haven't heard anything. So and in a situation like this, you want a permit from us, we want to give it to you, and we don't have enough information. And if we're just going to waive and waive and waive without, it's just such a bad precedent to me, and I'm super frustrated. I don't know kind of why I'm here at some point.
All right, thanks, Janet. Chris?
I was just going to suggest that you could continue this public hearing to a date certain in the future, and we can try to talk to the fire department about at least number 8 here with regard to the width of the driveway. And I'm not sure that number 7 relates to the fire department, but if it does, I can ask them about that question as well.
I think 7 is more related to the town engineer myself. It's a
So
sort of roadway and traffic, which I assume is the town engineer's purview. I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe there's somebody
right.
else that,
So ask the town engineer about number 7 and ask the fire department about number 8.
that's what I would think. I see Dave's hand. Dave, do you have other thoughts?
No, I just wanted to echo what Chris said. You know, we're happy to take these questions back, and if the board would be willing to continue this public hearing, we would be happy to come back to a date certain, you know, that works in your schedule and have these questions addressed.
Okay, great. Well, that seems to be where we're headed. Chris, do you want to, I mean,
You want to go through the conditions?
yeah, I think we ought to talk about as much as we can tonight, and whenever we come back at a date certain, we can have as short a conversation as possible.
Okay. So the first 2 conditions are pretty standard. Project shall be built according to plans approved by the planning board on whatever date you approve them on. And the project,
Chris, I still see Dave's hand, and I don't know if it's a legacy, so, okay, it's gone. Go ahead.
okay. So that's according to the plans approved on X date. And then the project shall be managed according to the management plan approved by the planning board on X date. So those are kind of standard things that you usually apply. Then the hours of operation shall be from dawn to dusk. That's pretty standard for this type of facility that the town owns. So I think that's a reasonable condition. The 4th one is changes to the project or substantial changes to any approved site plans shall be submitted to the planning board for review and approval prior to the work taking place. The purpose of the submittal is for the planning board to approve the change and determine that the changes are de minimis or significant enough to require modification of the site plan review approval. And that's another one that's pretty standard. The 5th, number 5, proposed shade structure and sign designs shall be submitted to the planning board for review and approval after review by the design review board and prior to installation. That's another thing that is that you often put in with regard to those types of structures and signs. And then the 6th one relates to this issue that we just discovered. I think it was either today or yesterday. All time is melding into one day to me, but in any event, it occurred to us because of another project that we're working on that structures in the FPC need approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I talked to the building commissioner and he agreed that the shade structure, the bridges and the boardwalks are all considered structures, at least with regard to the building code, but we don't have a definition of structure in our zoning bylaw, unfortunately. So we suggest that you approve the site plan review and then make a condition that the applicant has to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals to get the special permit for those structures in the FPC. So those were all the conditions that I came up with. Were there others that we decided along the way here? I don't remember.
Well, let me ask you about number 6. Why do we need to put in a condition that basically says follow the zoning bylaw?
You don't need to. It's just if people need reassurance that this is actually going to occur.
Okay. Janet.
So on number 5, you know, if the ZBA is going to look at the location of the shade structure, and that's in their purview, I'm sort of happy to defer to them how it looks. I don't think that, you know, they do, you know, it just doesn't seem like we have to approve the look and they approve the location. It seems kind of repetitive. And can we just cede that to them just to handle shade structures so you don't have to be showing us pictures and then them locations and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly could. I think traditionally the planning board has more architectural and landscape expertise, and the zoning board has more to do with what kinds of things are appropriate in certain zones. So, Bruce?
Oh, firstly, I agree with you, Doug. I think I agree with what I think you agree with, which is that number 6 is unnecessary. Um, as far as the number 5 is concerned, and my understanding from the conversation today at the site visit, I think it might have been during that, was that these shade structures haven't yet been designed. Maybe they have. I can't remember because I'm not looking at the drawing set right now. I think I clearly remember that the budget is not in place to build these right now. So it's possible that they haven't been finally designed. So that being the case, if that is the case, then it would be therefore that the zoning board would not be in a position to do a good review of the design if they haven't been designed. So that being if that is the case, then I would suggest that we maintain that we retain this number 5.
Okay.
So maybe the question is my supposition correct? Is the shade structure designed fully evident in the documentation? Because if it is, then I would say yes, that's probably we could defer to the zoning board. Although I'd prefer for them to come back. But if it's not designed, they can't.
Chris,
They have not been designed. We've given you 3 ideas about what they might look like, but they haven't been designed.
Yep.
So it sounds like you would prefer to keep number 5 and eliminate number 6. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I'm going to ask a question kind of about the context for this whole site plan review. You know, when I look at the Dodson and Flinker drawings, there's nothing in here about the parking area.
Nope.
The parking layout seems to be a separate product of perhaps town staff.
Mm-hmm.
Could we approve the work that Dodson and Flinker is showing and not act on the town parking lot? And simply say the context for this zoning, for this site plan review is the work that Dodson and Flinker is doing?
It's a good question.
I like that.
Because
could we ask them to come back on the?
I mean, I guess the town wants you guys. The town wants to put some Jersey barriers on the parking lot, and I know when we were looking at that pot production facility down on Hall Drive, you know, we made that guy come back, and I think we ended up saying that most of those concrete barriers he had on that property were de minimis, and we didn't even really require a new site plan review. I mean, I know we talked about the barriers he had out at the street. So, you know, you don't really want to do anything to the parking lot right now, except have Guilford drop some Jersey barriers there. Should we just not go there? Nate, what do you think?
Could I suggest that we just approve, you know, what we can approve and just say, come back to us on the parking lot and things like that? Can we do a partial?
You can't.
I mean, I think I would.
Site plan review. No.
Yeah, I think continuing the hearing, if you need more information to approve the parking lot, essentially the site plan is approving any, you know, any improvements to the property, even the smaller changes to the parking. So, you know, we are essentially demarcating a new parking area. There's a new layout in terms of handicap parking and then access with a trail. And so, you know, I'd rather have that be part of the approval. The Dodson plan, when the town contracted with Dodson, it really was for the trails, right? So that's really what we were hoping to understand. While that was happening, it came to light that the parking lot needs improvements, you know, in terms of resurfacing, accessibility improvements to get to the trails, and that wasn't originally part of their scope or the budget. And so, I mean, I think I agree that while this is happening, we're also looking at, as Dave mentioned, a comprehensive plan for the site. So, the parking lot may be temporary. That could be a few years, right? But the idea would be to come up with what is a future use for that area that isn't in the floodplain, whether it remains the way it is for now. Is there, as Dave mentioned, a few other possible municipal uses? The Housing Trust is eager to look at that area, and so we had never envisioned coming up with a formal parking design, thinking that at some point it would probably be changed to accommodate a different use on that higher area. But I think the site plan really approves everything that's being proposed, all the work being proposed. So,
okay, all right. So, I think we're headed toward a continuation here. Any other hands? I don't see any at the moment. Johanna?
If we can't make it through tonight and need a continuation, I would just be interested to hear from what impact that might have on any grants the town is raising to make this project.
Right. Well, I think our next meeting is January 3rd, assuming we hold it. Chris or Dave, do you want to comment on if we go to early January? It sounded like that was not an issue. Dave?
Can you hear me, Doug?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I would favor a continuance to give us more time to investigate those few options about the requests we made. To Johanna's point or question, I have not heard any significant concerns or requested changes to the trail system, and that's really what we need to get out to bid. So if I'm hearing the board members correctly, your concerns are really about the parking lot, parking access from West Pomeroy, those kinds of things. They are not part of the grant funding or the bid. For the most part, the bid, I think, Nate, correct me if I'm wrong, but they would not be part of the bid at all, really. So I'm pretty confident that a continuation would not, to sometime in January, would not negatively impact our bidding.
Okay. Great. That's good news.
Yeah, I will say that we don't have a budget at all for significant improvements or changes to the parking areas. So, and the grants will not pay for those. So we're gonna try to answer all of your questions with the expertise from the fire department and town engineering.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I guess one other thing that I could ask whether you considered, which was for now, maybe putting Jersey barriers along the edge of the existing clubhouse and leaving the parking lot with 2 points of access, one of which is wide enough and probably sloped adequately, and the other one which is somewhat substandard, but has been there for 65 years. Dave?
So yeah, we did consider that. We came up with this new plan, which we thought was based on safety, about getting people, visitors, etc., away from the clubhouse. But I think if you continue this hearing, we will go back to the drawing board a little bit and look at that, maybe going back to the drawing board, shall we say, a little bit on access to the site. So we're happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Bruce?
Just reminding you, Doug, that there was another condition that we discussed as a possible, and that was putting a minimum on the parking. I don't necessarily support that, but I thought some may, and now would be the time.
Right. It seemed like, by the time the conversation was over, everybody or most people were comfortable with using the 27 spaces and the 3 ADA spaces. And certainly not gonna push that issue any further if, I didn't hear a groundswell of support. I think I did hear a couple of, at least one person saying that was good, but it's clear the town is going to be back whenever they decide to invest some more money in this. So all of that can be revisited. Okay. Chris, anything you want to say about your extensive possible findings on this document?
No, I just wanted to ask the board if they felt that it was necessary to go through all of those findings and come up with reasons why each one was found, or is this the kind of project that would be suitable to say that the project meets the relevant criteria? I would be happy to go through all of the findings, not tonight, but by January 3rd, if you want that to be done. I didn't have time to do it for tonight.
Right.
So why don't you let me know?
Okay.
Sometimes you manage the more simple projects by just saying this project meets the relevant criteria of section 11.24, but most of the time we go through all the findings. So it's
Right.
up to you.
Okay. Bruce?
I think I'm comfortable with the first. I mean, I haven't been on the board that long, so maybe, but I do, and maybe I'm affected by the protocols and practices of 25 years ago when I was on the board for 7 years. But it does seem to me, and I'll make one point on this, that we are a board, we have a certain amount of time available to us. We've got a lot to do in that time. So in the interest of optimizing the use and the value of our time, I'm inclined to think that the one line is sufficient. I'd be interested to hear whether others agree.
Okay, Bruce. Karen?
Totally agree. I agree with Bruce.
Okay. And I guess I was thinking, we could sort of leave the meeting at the moment with the agreement that we would just have the single line. But if anybody reads through that section and thinks otherwise, between now and whenever we continue this conversation, and preferably far enough in advance of the conversation that staff can respond with the individual comments, we could proceed in that way too. Okay. Chris, were there any other documents you wanted us to get through on this topic?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Other than to acknowledge that I sent you a memo with regard to how this project met the requirements of Article 16, which you don't need to vote on that, but I think it's necessary to acknowledge that it meets the requirements of Article 16, because Article 16 talks about whenever you do any activities within the 100-year flood zone, that you are supposed to permit it. And so here we are permitting it by the Conservation Commission issuing an order of conditions, and eventually the planning board issuing a site plan review approval. And then, of course, we have the Zoning Board of Appeals that would be issuing its special permit for those structures. So I will revise that memo now that we know that the Zoning Board of Appeals has a role here too. But that's the only thing that I wanted to make sure that you knew and that you acknowledged that.
Okay, great. All right, so it does, actually, Janet, I see your hand.
So Chris, I was, I know this section is brand new and it took you 10 years to achieve it. And so I was like, oh, we're applying it. So do I understand from you that the staff has looked at these very flat, pathways that basically are going to be replicating the existing flat pathways almost completely and adding a few more and taking away some, is not going to result in any increase in flood levels? within the community. So it seems like we have to make a finding that this analysis has been done and there's no, negative impact on the flood zone. So I think when I read your email before, it's like you all looked at that and made that determination. So, and then we need a finding on that, right?
I think that is a determination that the Conservation Commission made when they issued their order of conditions. But if you want to make that finding as well, I think we could do that.
Okay, I thought that your email was suggesting, but if the Concom has done that, I'm good.
Okay. All right. All right. Thanks, Janet. Okay. So is it simple? Is it adequate for me to make a motion that this hearing be continued to a date certain? And you can give me some suggestions about the date and time. I know we were planning to talk about whether we needed to have a January 3rd meeting. And
That was before.
I know you had hoped that we would not meet so that you could catch up on minutes. So, I guess part of the question has to do with how urgently the town would like us to finish this up. And Dave sounded like anytime in January is probably fine, but I'm not sure whether you really need our sign off to issue your bid, or whether you can prepare the bid and go out to bid even before we're done.
Well, a couple of things from me. One is that January 17th is not a reasonable date to continue this hearing to, because we have the Fort River School coming up, and that's a huge project, and it's going to take probably at least 2 meetings to get through that. And then there's also the issue of the Zoning Board of Appeals needing to approve these structures in the FPC zoning district. So I would say it's either January 3rd or it's February 7th, I think, is the next possible date. And so far for February 7th, we don't have any public hearings. So.
Well, in terms of your workload and priorities, which do you prefer?
Speaking for myself, I think January 3rd would work, but I have 2 colleagues who also participate with me, and one of them is taking all of next week off, and the other one is taking a few days next week off. So I will be here. I'll be here, and I think I can manage to get the packets out at least.
Well,
Chris,
Nate and I, or I guess Pam will be back on Thursday. So Pam and I can get the packets out. If it's just this project, or maybe if it's this project and the continuation of the topic that we haven't gotten to yet, I think we can manage it. But let me see Pam's face. Is Pam looking very...
Chris, this is Dave. Sorry to jump in. I had my hand up, Doug. Chris, I would just advocate, I think January 3rd is not realistic. We need to get the fire department. We need to talk to the town engineer. Next week is a holiday week. I just think it's unrealistic to think we will turn this around and have adequate preparation for the board by January 3rd. I think I don't feel comfortable we can do that. So
okay, well, it could be January 31st. We have a 3rd meeting scheduled for January.
I think that's fine. Nate, if Nate would just chime in, Nate, are you in agreement that if these are really issues to do with access in the parking lot, the bid for the trails themselves can still go out?
Yeah, I had raised my hand and lowered it, thinking that the 3rd wouldn't be adequate time to speak to the engineer, if they're on vacation or out, or
and if we need to come up with an alternative plan, go back to kind of the original plan of having access via the current entrance, which is closer to the clubhouse, that'll take a little time to draw and bring together. So I think the end of January is much more realistic if the board is agreeable to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, right, I haven't heard many concerns about the trail layout itself or benches or other things, and that's really what we're bidding. I think, like Dave mentioned, it's the parking lot to the road is what the town's doing. The trails are what the contractor is doing. So I feel comfortable that, we're trying to have bids be publicized in early January, just so we can have someone under contract as soon as possible. But it doesn't, the Conservation Commission has reviewed this, and so the trail locations are pretty, they approve those. And since I'm not hearing any concern tonight, I feel like comfortable that we can go ahead with getting bid documents together. And then the 31st doesn't really delay that.
Okay, great. All right, so 6:35 on, do we want to go to January 31st or February 6th or something, 7th?
February 7th.
Chris, do you care?
I'd say that January 31st is okay with me. Is it okay with Pam and Nate?
Yeah. Okay. Pam, I'm
Wait.
not hearing now. Keep talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, it's absolutely fine with me in terms of, availability. We just have to be mindful of the idea that we're going to then again have back-to-back meetings. So we just have to be thinking about what we have going on the 7th, which at this time is nothing.
Right, but I suspect the Fort River School is can come back too.
It could.
Yeah. Bruce,
I second your motion, Doug.
the motion I haven't made yet.
I
Thank
think you
you,
have.
Bruce. So, so a motion to continue to 6:35 on January 31st.
Second.
Thank you, Bruce. Chris and Pam, you have that noted? All right, we'll
do.
go. Any comments on the motion on the table? Janet? You are muted.
Was it seconded? I was going to second.
Yes, Bruce got in there.
Okay, ahead of time.
Yep. Okay. All right, then we'll go through a roll call. Starting with you, Bruce.
I approve.
And Fred.
Aye.
Jesse.
Aye.
Janet.
Aye.
Johanna.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Okay, it's unanimous to continue this hearing to January 31st at 6:35. Great. Dave, any last thoughts?
No, I just want to thank the board for their input, and we will work hard during the month of January to address the concerns and questions you raised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, the time is 9:36. And the next item on our agenda, I believe, was continuing the potential housing overlay zone along University Drive. Given the hour, this is not a hearing. We are not obligated to talk about this very long or at all. I am wondering whether we really want to do this or whether we just want to move along and conclude the evening and come back maybe on January 3rd, which is the conversation we still want to have, is will we meet on January 3rd? Karen, I see your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that I had my hand up, but I think we should try not to meet on January 3rd and give our staff some time off to finally do the minutes and just not keep overwhelming them.
Okay, Janet?
I was going to suggest that we put this discussion off to the January 31st meeting, because I think that we're going to wrap up Hickory quickly. I'm definitely not in the mood to talk about the overlay district, which I'm excited about, but not at the moment.
Okay. All right. Johanna?
I like hear the ghost of planning board members past saying, you have to approach this issue of housing with urgency. And so there's part of me that wants to spend 20 minutes and just time cap ourselves at 10 o'clock to discuss the proposed consensus agreement and take
Okay.
it from there.
All right. Karen, I see your hand again.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, Nate.
Yeah, I was going to just kind of along the lines of what Johanna said. If not tonight, Bruce had synthesized the notes, and then I had redrawn possible boundary changes. And so whether or not it's discussed tonight, to think about those, you can always send comments to staff, and we can combine those and then get those distributed before the next time we discuss it. So if we're not going to have a discussion tonight, individual members can also take notes on their own.
Yeah, I'm tired. I don't want to talk about this tonight. But I am also feeling some urgency to get this worked out and sent up to town council. We are going to have Fort River School. We're going to have a design standards consultant coming on sometime in the spring, we think, to help us with design standards for downtown, which will be a 18-month or 2-year process, a pretty heavy lift for staff. And so if we don't do this soon, it's probably not going to happen for a while. And I guess like Johanna, I'm hearing the people saying, we have a housing crisis, do something. And, it's really up to us to generate some stuff. So I see 3 hands. Actually, Chris, I'm going to let you go first.
Okay, I was just going to say we could piggyback this onto the Fort River School. Sometimes you get into the middle of a really big public hearing and you realize that you have many questions and the public hearing has to be continued. So it could be that there would be time on the 17th to talk about this particular issue for, 45 minutes to an hour at the end of that meeting. So I think that's what I would say. I personally am not feeling like delving into something that's complicated right now. And I think looking at your faces that others aren't as well. So I would suggest put it on at the end of the 17th and we'll see if we get to it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that seems like a good idea. Jesse.
I kind of want to split the difference and ask Nate to give us 5 minutes on what changed, just so we can think about it for the 17th. But I like Chris's idea a lot about.
All right.
Sure. I'll give my elevator pitch. No, I think Bruce's document is nice. In its summary, I think there were some consensus points. I mean, so what I'd like to do then for the next meeting would be actually start to fill out, kind of a template bylaw. And after the meeting, the recent discussions, my thought would be to call this something, whether it's like an economic and housing and economic development overlay, because of the kind of the discussion about trying to keep commercial, right? So the idea would be that the name of the overlay is intentional, and then the purpose and the goals of it are reinforced and work their way down. And so I think what I've heard is that we don't want to limit housing to student housing. So we're actually the opposite. We're going to allow apartments and mixed use buildings, maybe not allow the student dormitories, or if they are, would be by special permit, but other things would be by site plan review. We like the idea of additional stories. We like the idea of having a pretty high percentage of first floor requirement of being non-residential space. And so, it could be that other things, there's more on upper floors of non-residential, but we'd have a requirement for first floor. What Bruce had said, what the things that aren't kind of resolved are the details, the setbacks, some architectural design standards. I think those are things staff could work on. I think it will be different. For instance, the west side, there's the access drive, and the right of way is actually really wide on that section of street, but it's off-centered from the road. So Swift Way is in the right of way, and then there's still a lot of other space on the east side. A lot of it's wet, but on the west side, for instance, I think we almost want, it could be a 12, 15, 18-foot setback to allow for that second pedestrian, off-street corridor. And so, I think that we could look at that and say, okay, that's what we would want. I still think 4 floors with a step back to a 5th floor. And so, not 5 floors straight up the straight, right up on the facade, but it would be step back. I think recommending aligning curb cuts with the other side of the street so we have reduced user conflicts between vehicles and pedestrians. Considering what kind of open space amenities requirements we would have. Right now it's looking to me like we wouldn't have a full build out like BG, but it'd be more like 70% or something, lot coverage and building coverage would be something. Half space minimum parking requirements. So I do think that all those pieces were really well taken. I would apply inclusionary zoning, maybe have a little bit bigger requirement in terms of getting higher AMI. That would be a local program, not something that is run through the state. And so, just putting all those pieces down, I think the difficulty is how sometimes it's like, how prescriptive do we want an overlay to be, right? We can essentially take pieces from the existing bylaw and put it together, or we could come up with something really creative, or we could be really prescriptive, or do we have uses, dimensional standards, and a few guidelines, and that's where it goes, or do we get really prescriptive in terms of architecture and what we want? And I think that's a discussion, and I think it can go either way. I do think that this is a really great opportunity where there's room for density and infill. I want to make sure it's what we think we're going to get what we want in terms of appearance and aesthetics. And so, I sent those pictures around of new development. And so I haven't heard from anyone, but I just want to make sure we're not thinking we're going to get 19th century buildings, like what we see behind me, right? Or like brick buildings with granite lintels and all this stuff. What we might get is like Live 155 in Northampton, where it's a modern building and maybe we want to see some relief in architecture, some detail along the roof line, a parapet or whatever, some overhangs. But I think this is a nice overlay. I think we have to consider, do we want like townhouse style development, or is it going to be mostly bigger unit bigger multifamily buildings, like apartments or mixed use? And so if so, how do we write that in? And I think those are the pieces that would be discussed. And so, as an overlay, again, too, it's voluntary. So just think anything that's allowed now, there's already a number of kind of zoning districts that could still happen. And then the boundaries, we asked about why include the Jones property north of Amity Street, but that one house on the corner is zone BL. And so not including in the overlay is fine, but then there's this little part of BL that's not in the overlay. And then in the new map, I didn't include Hawkins Meadow or the auto shop next to it. I did, it's interesting, right? If we had the overlay, are we incentivizing changing Hawkins Meadow when right now it might be working fine? But I still kept the properties on all quadrants of that intersection. And so again, there was a discussion point around that. So I think the boundaries are important. And, I think kind of having that purpose and goals, I think we're working through them. And to me, if the idea is to keep student or housing opportunity and economic development, then that's kind of, to me, those are the two pieces we'd want to reinforce with the overlay. And so have goal statements that do that, have maybe new definitions if we need them, and dimensional standards and guidelines that get us there.
All right. I didn't time you, but I think you hit 5 minutes. All right. So we have homework, and we're going to skip class on January 3rd, I think. But we'll be back on the 17th. All right. So I guess I need to run through the rest of the agenda here. But first, are we finished? We're done with the housing overlay for this evening? Any objections? All right. Other housing issues. I think this was related to some of the concerns that Jesse had raised. Anything we need to say tonight? Okay. Old business. Chris, anything?
No old business, no.
How about new business? Anything? not reasonably anticipated.
New business, we're putting our planner position back out for hoping that someone will be interested in coming to work with us because we're such a fun group to work with and we have really interesting work to do. So hopefully that'll go out in the next couple of weeks and we'll get a new vibrant, energetic person.
Okay.
Department.
All right. Form A&R subdivisions.
Oh, maybe Nate wants to say something about new business, which is
Sure,
Nate.
yeah, I think the design standards, Chris.
Yes.
Yeah, so the town did, there was a review committee, the town selected Dodson and Flinker. And the contract was actually executed today. So I think we're moving that along pretty quickly. The hope to have a meeting in January, a meeting or two, just to get that going. And we'll keep everyone up to date on that. So, initially it'll be meeting with staff and kind of laying out the schedule and process and, how do they envision the, next 3 months going in terms of public outreach and documentation and everything. So we're pretty excited. We had 3 responses, all qualified firms. Dodson really had a nice, thorough response. They really understood the scope of work and what we're asking and context. And they've actually, they've done this in Northampton and other communities. They were one of the respondents that had really solid visuals and zoning and narratives to accompany their graphics. So we're pretty pleased with that.
All right, great. Okay, back to the Form A&R. Anything?
No Form As.
Nothing?
No,
All right, ZBA applications, anything?
I have no report.
Okay. Planning board, upcoming SPP, SPR, SUBs. Other
Well,
than
we know
the
that we have
Fort River
school
School.
Yeah.
coming on the 17th. Yep. And that is a big one. Yep.
Okay.
Very exciting. It's beautiful. It went to the design review board the other night and they were very pleased with it. They didn't have any negative comments and they really liked the design. It's really quite lovely, quite graceful.
Is there a traffic report associated with this?
There is a traffic report. There is
Because I know I've heard sort of mutterings that there's concern among some people that that putting the school here in is going to really snarl traffic in that basic part of town. So does the traffic report seem comprehensive enough?
I would say I'm going to reserve judgment on that.
Okay. Bruce?
On that subject, I attended the the building committee meeting, as I have for the past 3 years on this project. And I mentioned the likely concern that this board would have in that on that subject. So I'm sure they'll be prepared. It's one of the things I mentioned to them was that the concerns for the traffic that the project has had in the past has been evaluation of the traffic challenges and so forth associated with the Wildwood site versus the Fort River site. So it was an assessment of traffic related to choosing a site. And I wanted to make sure that they changed their focus to not that particular concern, but how it would work here. I'm sure they'll be prepared. They, as Chris said, this is an exceptional design team. They really are good.
Good, great. Okay, moving on to planning board committee and liaison reports. PVPC, Bruce, anything you want to say?
Well, there was a meeting and they had basically a presentation on battery energy storage systems, quite elaborate actually, and I don't want to go into too much on this, but there's a model ordinance that's been produced, and the other thing is that, I mean, it's been produced. It's probably something that Janet knows a little bit about, or maybe a lot about. But the PVPC are are supporting the towns in this. And also the district local technical assistance deadline's been extended, and one of the points in which they offer funding assistance is related to housing. I'm sure, Nate, you've looked at this, but I just thought I'd mention it because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. For CPAC, I have been attending weekly meetings on Thursdays, and I think we have our next meeting tomorrow. I think it may be the last meeting. I want to give a lot of credit to Dave Zomek and some of the other town staff, including Chris, for basically finding out what the original complete set of asks were. And once, they understood what the shortfall was, coming back and prioritizing the town asks, so that I think that we're probably going to be able to fund kind of everything that's left, is kind of what it looks like to me. So we'll see what happens, and you're welcome to tune in. Karen, anything on DRB?
Yeah, so I missed that meeting that Chris was talking about the school, because I was in the air at that time. So I'm sorry, I don't have anything to say.
Okay. You're not going to tell us how Hawaii is, huh?
Right now, it's cold and windy and rainy.
Oh, gosh. Just like here. Okay, CRC, Chris,
You're
anything?
smiling.
CRC, I haven't been to a CRC meeting recently, but the town council did refer the solar bylaw to the CRC. Maybe Janet mentioned this last time with the request that they report back by sometime in June, I believe.
In June, okay, so a pretty long period.
Wow.
Okay,
Hopefully it'll be sooner than that.
all right, all right. Great, so the time now is 9:55 and I don't have a report other than to say it's been a great 2023 with all of you. I hope we have as equally or better a time in 2024. Have a good rest and of January 17th. Chris, anything from you?
Thank you and happy holidays, and we'll look forward to seeing you in mid-January.
All right. Anybody have anything else?
Thank you to the staff.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, time is 9:55 and I think we are adjourned. Good night.
Bye.
All right, good night, Pam.
Good night, Mr. Marshall. Yes.